Hello and welcome to another live stream. I am MixJW Caleb, and today we are going to be taking a look into a video that was leaked in 2022 that features Robert Hendricks, who was by then the pretty much like the manager of the Public Information Department, and it's about like just the Jehovah's Witnesses just like masturbating over how good their legal department is. And so I have been meaning to watch it again. Like it came out right when I was like kind of like just getting my foot in the door and like figuring out how to do like apostate stuff or whatever. So I didn't react to it at the time. I didn't play it. There were some waves that happened, and a lot of things have happened since then. So it's going to be a very interesting look into how this religion has changed. Like just even in just like the past what, like few years, 2 years. Let me just figure out how to. Oh crap! Should I upload the video? Let me just figure it out. Hold on. I should have done this before. So how are you guys doing? Are you guys having a good time? Okay, there you go. Let me know if you guys can hear it.
Hello and welcome to our program.
Can you guys hear it? Is that good? Let's take a little time to say hello to everybody. Hi, Apostle Ministry School. Hi, Just a Little Blue. Hi, Frog Mode. Hi, Seeking Fruit. Hi, Agreeable Pixie. Sounds good. All right, perfect. So let me just give you a little bit of background and then we'll dive right in. This guy is Robert Hendricks. Robert Hendricks used to be working for the religion. He was basically in charge of the Public Information Department, the PID. He pretty much built it. And the Public Information Department is this new department that talks about that kind of like tries to put a spin on Jehovah's Witness stuff towards the media. They reach out to the media and they try to get puff pieces and all of that posted. So that's who they are, basically. All right. So Robert Hendricks, since then, has been removed from his position as PID manager or whatever, the head of the department, and is exactly Micah Bay say it's a PR department. That is exactly what it is. It's pretty much the PR department of this cult, right? He has then been removed since for some reason. I actually don't know exactly why he was removed. But we are gonna get into it. I actually looked into Robert Hendricks quite a lot because he's an extremely slimy person. But before I was able to like post my video on Robert Hendricks, he was removed, and then I didn't know what happened then, and I was like, oh, I need to update the script, and then I didn't end up like talking about Robert Hendricks in this channel at all. But I feel like today is an amazing chance to talk about Robert Hendricks and see this leaked legal department.
The constitutionally protected right to go door to door, how Watchtower v. Stratton protects free speech for all. This program is being streamed on YouTube along with live Zoom feeds simultaneously serving 10 state bar associations and the country of Jamaica as a continuing legal education program.
That's obviously how this got leaked, because they decided to stream this on YouTube, and somebody was like, "Oh, don't mind if I do, let me record this." So that's how this got leaked. Let's watch it. This is Masonic hand sign. I swear to God, like every time like somebody says like does this or just does this or just do this a little bit, like people are like, man, these guys are Masonic. His hand gestures are strange. Yeah, his hand gestures is strange, but that's only because he's an awkward Jehovah's Witness. He doesn't know how to talk like a real person.
We welcome the hundreds of attorneys, government officials, jurists, and academics joining the broadcast today on one of those feeds. Now imagine being charged criminally because you failed to get the permission of the government before you knocked on your neighbor's door to talk about the garbage service, perhaps an environmental or political issue, or, as in the case of Jehovah's Witnesses, your faith. Essentially, a 1998 ordinance in the village of Stratton, Ohio, did just that. Jehovah's Witnesses challenged the constitutionality of that law, and the case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And on this day, 20 years ago, Associate Justice John Paul Stevens announced the High Court's resounding 8-1 decision declaring the ordinance unconstitutional. In its opinion, the court stated this: "It is offensive not only to the values protected by the First Amendment, but to the very notion of a free society, that in the context of everyday public discourse, a citizen must first inform the government of her desire to speak to her neighbors and then obtain a permit to do so." The ruling naturally had a profound impact on the public preaching work of Jehovah's Witnesses almost immediately. But it also paved the way for all citizens to make.
No, it did not have any change. Like what he's talking about, basically in 2022, and I was looking it up, but I could find it just to make sure that I got it right. But in 2022, there was basically like this push for a law that said, hey, these guys are basically door-to-door canvassing with no permit. Like this is a massive organization, which is they're international right now, and they have this army of like millions of volunteers, door-to-door canvassing. They should not be able to do that without a permit. That's it. It was just about a permit. But the Jehovah's Witnesses were like, oh, actually, we are just neighbors, just knocking on your door, even though no, we're not. So are you saying that we need a permit to go and knock on our neighbor's door if we need sugar? Which is obviously not what they do. What they do is just door-to-door canvassing. But they were able to fool the courts back then into believing them, basically, and they were able to win. Right? That shows the importance of raising awareness, like of channels like this one, and more and better and bigger channels shining light on all this stuff, so the government knows, like, has the background. Because if the government is going to be lazy, right? If you don't get involved in your government, or if you don't at least like make it as easy as possible for the government to realize that the Jehovah's Witnesses are like this cult, then you will not be able to change anything. This would keep happening. However, I'm happy to report that hasn't been happening anymore, because apostates have been getting into it, into informing governments on the true nature of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Maintain an open dialogue with their neighbors on any number of issues, environmental.
Guys, I'm saying, I'm checking. I know that one person thinks over here that this guy is Illuminati because he uses the same signs that I've been using sometimes. This guy, like, these are the same kind of people that accuse me of being an Illuminati. And I'm like, where's my check, man? Like, aren't Illuminati like super rich? Like, if you want to believe that someone is Illuminati, you will not be able to convince them otherwise. Just as if somebody wants to believe that somebody is part of it, was chosen by God to be in the governing body, you will not be able to convince them otherwise.
Civic, political, educational, or religious, without governmental interference. This program looks back on that historic ruling and how it continues to protect free speech for all. Let's watch as our feature presenter, Josh McDaniel, director of the Religious Freedom Clinic at Harvard Law School, provides an overview of the case and its impact.
The core issue in the Village of Stratton case was the right to go door to door for advocacy. In this case, the Village of Stratton had passed an ordinance making it a criminal misdemeanor violation to go door to door to canvass or solicit for any cause. And the village had interpreted its ordinance to apply to the door-to-door ministry efforts of Jehovah's Witnesses.
They came up with this thing that says you can't do door-to-door canvassing, and they applied it to the door-to-door canvassing that we do as Jehovah's Witnesses, which we obviously took personally.
But more important than that, the ordinance also went far beyond the ministry efforts of Jehovah's Witnesses. It also applied to any type of social or commercial or religious or even political door-to-door canvassing that any citizen might do, going across the street to your neighbors, anything from going door-to-door to sell Girl Scout cookies to going door-to-door to advocate for a political candidate. So the Jehovah's Witnesses sued to vindicate their ability to do this type of door-to-door advocacy without having to first go and register with the mayor's office and receive a permit. And it's important.
It's insane to me that he's like, oh yeah, no, it's so good because otherwise, like, it's good for politicians. Jehovah's Witnesses don't give a shit about that. Like, Jehovah's Witnesses repress voters. And by the way, I posted like this video on how Jehovah's Witnesses repress voters because I assumed that everybody would realize that Jehovah's Witnesses repress voters is one of the illegal things that they do, right? And I got some pushback because they're like, Jehovah's Witnesses don't repress voters, they're just neutral. Yeah, what happens if you're not neutral? Like, it's the consequences of what happens if you're not neutral that is the suppression bit. It's insane. How late am I? It's fine to anybody who's just joining in right now. This is a video that was leaked in 2022 that it's about the legal department and how they were able to fool the government into convincing pretty much that what they do, the door-to-door canvassing work that they do to try to convert people that they don't even do anymore, was not the door-to-door canvassing, and it's pretty much just as rightful and as nice as just like going to your neighbor for a cup of sugar.
To keep in mind that nothing prevented residents in the village from posting no solicitation signs or no trespassing signs on.
By the way, we will keep watching it, but will this be uploaded as a video? I just joined. I forgot to say that up top. I got this from avoidjw.org. They just opened like this part of their website. We if I don't forget, we may I may show you the website at the end, where they show all of the deleted videos or the leaked videos that have surfaced. They don't have all of them, but this is one of the most interesting ones that they have. And so yeah, you can go to avoidjw.org. They are great. They don't know who I am. I don't work for them. It is just a really good resource, and a resource that I am very, very happy to promote all the time, because go and support them.
Their yards. When the Jehovah's Witnesses sued, the lower courts initially ruled against them and in large part upheld the ordinance as it was applied to them, and held that the village had an interest in protecting its residents from undue annoyance and potential fraudulent schemes. The Supreme Court then took up the case, and in a very
protection fraudulent schemes, but we don't consider cults to be fraudulent schemes because they do fraud just with your feelings, which if they did it with money properly, then yeah. But since it's a religion, we decided that the government should be for it.
Very resounding 8-1 decision ruled that the ordinance violated the First Amendment in a substantial number of its applications, and as a result struck down the ordinance. And at this time, there were many other ordinances around the country that were being developed, and that this could have really set a precedent for other towns, cities, villages to adopt similar ordinances that would have really fundamentally altered our expectations about whether we can go door to door, whether we can cross the street to go visit our neighbor and communicate a message to them that's important to us. Municipalities and local government officials should take note of this decision, because it very clearly vindicated the rights of not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but all Americans to go to door for advocacy. And the Supreme Court was very clear that this is a fundamental, longstanding right. It's not only a right under the First Amendment, the court said, but it's fundamental to the very notion of a free society. And so for the court to say that is a constitutionally protected right, that even if it's a discretionless permitting scheme, it's unconstitutional for government officials to put that type of a burden on their citizens. They really need to think twice before doing that. It's remarkable. It's hard to point to any other organization, let alone a religious organization, that has had such a profound impact on the shaping of constitutional law over many decades in the Supreme Court. And
Now, this guy is from Harvard Law School. I don't think this guy is a Jehovah's Witness, right? Notice his slightly longer hair, um, and his shade of a beard back in 2022 before the lift on the lift on the ban of on beards. That being said, this guy this guy just said that the Jehovah's Witnesses have had a huge hand into shaping the United States Constitution pretty much. Remember this. Remember this. When they try to tell you that Jehovah's Witnesses are neutral, they are not neutral. All right? They manipulate the law. They get into politics. This is pretty much them getting into politics, just in a way that only large religions with millions of dollars at their disposal can, which, by the way, is a bigger way than your vote can go. Like that goes farther than your vote can go. I'm not saying don't go vote. You should go vote all of the time. What I'm saying is this religion tells people not to vote, and then they do like the equivalent of voting times like 1,000 and properly get involved in politics, not just to vote and to influence influence the government in a democratic way, but to influence the government from the inside out, so they get what they want without even having to engage in democracy.
I think a lot of that can be attributed to what the Supreme Court points out in its majority decision in the Stratton case, that it's because Jehovah's Witnesses, they were compelled by their religious convictions, whereas other citizens, when confronted with some type of issue, might have said it's not worth it for me to push back against this. It's not worth it to pursue this right. For Jehovah's Witnesses in these cases, they felt compelled by their religious convictions to pursue it, to vindicate it, to make sure that they could practice their religion. And as a result of that, carrying it all the way to the Supreme Court, they've obtained victory after victory and vindicated all kinds of constitutional rights that now Americans everywhere, whether they're religious or not, can enjoy. When the Jehovah's Witnesses do that, when they go to court, when they vindicate that constitutional right, they're not doing it just for themselves and just for their ability to go door to door and do their ministry. It's a right that now extends to everyone thanks to Jehovah's Witnesses.
That was
Crazy.
powerful. Thank you, Professor McDaniel, for the excellent overview of the case and for helping us.
See, he's basically saying that like Jehovah's Witnesses are doing this change in the law because of that affects all of us. It's not just voting; it's like direct change. It's just. I honestly, I still get triggered at how hypocritical the religion can be sometimes.
Us to understand the relevance of the case, not only for Jehovah's Witnesses, but for all. We also thank the Religious Freedom Clinic at Harvard Law School for participating in this program. We've enjoyed the collaboration so far and in this program. We look forward to having you back, Professor McDaniel, in the conversation as we talk about the broader First Amendment issues in the case in a few minutes.
I would absolutely love to know what Professor McDaniel has to say about, Jehovah's Witnesses properly, and what he has to say about the other laws that they've tried to influence, like mandatory reporting and all that stuff. I honestly, like, I'd love to just kind of like interview him and be like, why are you involved with them? And do you know all of this stuff? Do you know all of these studies? Do you know all of these reports? Do you know like that they're a cult according to the Byte model? Like all of that stuff. Like I would absolutely love to hear that, because these people, like, that's how Jehovah's Witnesses, that's where Jehovah's Witnesses thrive. Jehovah's Witnesses and cults like these thrive by fooling people, not just their members, but fooling people in the government or wherever, into thinking that they're just like this normal quirky religion, right? Which is like, I think I've been doing videos like these for almost 3 years. I'm closing in on my 200th upload right now, and at the beginning, I'm like, videos are not like, they're nothing, right? They don't work for anything. They're just entertainment. But I think I found like the purpose of these videos, and I think videos like mine, like channels, XJW channels, and all that stuff. The biggest value is on shining light, so Jehovah's Witnesses cannot, get away with doing this kind of stuff. If a reporter or whatever just types Jehovah's Witness Norway, say in on YouTube or on Google, It's good that they can find an ex-Jehovah's Witness perspective on this, and not just a Jehovah's Witness perspective on this. Because again, like, this is what happens when you only have a Jehovah's Witness perspective on this. The cult wins because the cult manages to fool people, not just into following them, but just into thinking that, oh yeah, they're just fighting for rights for everybody, when they literally forbid any of their members from voting. Like, imagine thinking that Jehovah's Witnesses are for freedom of speech when they are not allowed to vote. It's insane. It's crazy.
But now let's get to the case at hand. Watchtower v. Stratton. With us are the attorneys for the petitioner. On my left, Paul Palladoro, who is a counsel of record and who actually presented the oral argument before the Supreme Court, and Philip Brumley, who is general counsel for Watchtower. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Both of you were there on that day, February 26, 2002, arguing this case. But I think we'd be remiss in not starting with the broad overview. Philip, who are Jehovah's Witnesses, and why do they go door to door?
Jehovah's Witnesses are Christians, and we take very seriously.
What the ever living fuck is this? Just what is this? This is an internal thing. Only Bethelites were supposed to access this. And then you got Philip Brumley here, Jehovah's Witness lawyer, being like, oh, let me introduce Jehovah's Witnesses for anybody who has never heard of Jehovah's Witnesses here in this Bethelite audience. Jesus, what? Why do they do this? Why do they do this? Also, by the way, like, this is kind of slow. I'm gonna edit it. I'm gonna quickly edit it, like, while watching it. I'm gonna quickly edit it on the background into, being at least 25% faster, because Jehovah's Witnesses still speak slow even when they're doing just internal legal stuff, to self-masturbatory stuff, to be like, oh yeah, no, we're amazing. Come here, Philip Brumley. Tell us how amazing Jehovah's Witnesses are.
Seriously.
Also, who are they? Just for anybody who doesn't know, who are Jehovah's Witnesses?
What we learn from the Bible. While on earth, Jesus foretold this good news of the kingdom will be preached. And before he ascended to heaven, he told his followers, you will be witnesses of me to the most distant part of the earth. So the Bible is actually replete with similar texts. There are 8.5 million Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide. Every one of them.
Okay, we know this thing. Philip Brumley, for anybody who doesn't know, is a Bethelite who went to law school, paid by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, like fully paid by this religion exclusively, so he could become a lawyer in their ever increasingly large amount of legal cases for this religion. That's who Philip Brumley is. He is a Bethelite who became a lawyer, who went to law school on Jehovah's Witness dime to defend Jehovah's Witnesses in court.
Out of an act of love to God and neighbor. But Paul, why not a permit? What's the problem with that?
Well, God told us to do it, Robert. It'd be offensive to turn around and then ask man for permission to do that which God has already told us to do.
It's interesting that you say that, because obviously,
what a stupid thing to say. Do they not have a permit for being a religion? Do they not have are they not registered to the government because they're a religion? So they can get all of their religious, like tax breaks and all of that shit. Oh, that they do register. That they complain. They're like, oh, Norway's taking away our registration as Jehovah's Witnesses, the paperwork that we filed. We are gonna fight you over it, because then that means that we don't get money. But when it just comes to just a permit, to make sure that, say, PDF files are not going to your door, which happens all of the time due to the CSA issues inside this religion. If you want a permit to avoid that, oh no, Jehovah told me to do that. Why do I need to ask the government for help? Like, oh my God, what? I seldom get this mad, and honestly, I should have told you this. I hadn't watched this since 2022 when it came out, so I've forgotten a lot about this. So this is almost a blind reaction. Also, do you like the background? I had to turn on like green lights because my light, the spotlight, the sunset light that I have, finally gave out. After 2 years, Turns out like a $3 lamp, it only lasts like about 2.5 years, 3 tops.
Obviously, I've done a lot of research in preparation for this, and I recall a comment by one of the seminal cases for Jehovah's Witnesses, Schneider versus New Jersey. And I can remember, I'll just read it here, I have it down, that Clara Schneider, who was an incredible plaintiff, this was hard fought. She was convicted, she went to jail, but she conscientiously believed that to do so would be an act of disobedience to the command of the Almighty God. Now, why would Jehovah's Witnesses, who are more neutral politically, why would you fight in the court for that right?
Well, we follow the example of the first century Christians and the early apostles. We remember Peter when he was...
When they fought in court? What? When they fought in court so they didn't have to fulfill a permit? What?
Faced with opposition, famously said, we must obey God as ruler rather than men. And when released, resumed the preaching activity, teaching about the kingdom of God zealously and from house to house. We think of the example of the Apostle Paul, who was imprisoned and who also said that he was involved in legally defending and establishing the good news. So we think about his example. When he faced official interference, he said, I appeal to Caesar. He relied upon his rights as a Roman citizen, and when appropriate, we relied upon our rights too.
Yes, to be a Christian. To be a Christian. Like that they're comparing Paul appealing to Caesar, his right to be a Christian, to believe in Jesus, his right to believe in him. They're comparing it to just their right to go door-to-door canvassing, which, by the way, is not it's not a thing anymore. Like, the Jehovah's Witnesses are increasingly doing less and less door-to-door canvassing. They don't even report their hours. But like 2 years ago, like right before the lift on the hour reporting happened, it was a huge part of being a Jehovah's Witness, which is why this is so important. If this had happened like just like in a couple of years, I would have bet like they wouldn't have even like fought this much.
Well, Jesus laid down the rule. He said, pay back Caesar's things to Caesar, but God's things to God. So as a religious tenet, we want to be law-abiding citizens. But when authorities cross the line and ask us to do something that contravenes our faith.
When authorities cross the line and ask us to get a permit to go door-to-door canvassing, they asked them for a permit and they were like, that's crossing the line. That is crossing the line. We are not I do not consent. Like, Jesus Christ, come on.
Robert, there's no debate. There's no dispute. We are going.
Hey, Caleb, your hair looks cool today. Thank you so much for Quinifetulence for your two buckety doos today. Thank you. Also, it looks nice because I have not showered.
To fight, and we're going to fight with everything we have. And we're actually following the model, as Paul said, of the first century Christians. Now, that said, we've never intended or want to be social activists. Paul also wrote to Timothy that we should.
I know that. Listen. We don't want this to be like, I know we just framed it as this freedom of speech kind of thing, but we also don't want to be like fighters for freedom of any kind. Okay, one of those like activisms. No, we decided that's also bad. We are only activists for our religion. Let me tell you.
Pray for those in authority that we could go on leading calm and quiet lives. So we would like nothing better than to be able to quietly, peacefully go on serving Jehovah according to what the Bible teaches. As a result of this, though, when Caesar does cross...
And the Bible doesn't teach that we need to get a permit to go door-to-door preaching, because it doesn't even have door-to-door preaching.
Cross the line, when the authorities cross the line and ask us to compromise our beliefs or our faith. Well, we can't do that. And as a result, not by design, but over the course of decades, Jehovah's Witnesses have prevailed before the Supreme Court 49 times before Stratton, and with the victory in Stratton, 50 times.
That's pretty extraordinary. Now, think about Stratton for a moment, because taking it to the Supreme Court, Paul, the stakes were high.
The stakes are very high, Robert. When we lost in Ohio, in the district court and then the Court of Appeals, that adverse decision was localized to Ohio and a few surrounding states. But in taking it to the Supreme Court, we then faced the risk of extending nationwide the Supreme Court's granting permission to require us to obtain a permit. Now, we had litigated cases in the 30s and 40s that established our right to preach. So the question was, in 2002, were those cases historical relics, or did they still have modern viability?
So all of this case law from the 30s and 40s that had been built up over time was really, in a sense, put at risk, at least to some degree. Yes, Philip?
Yes. And what we were seeing was that after those victories in the 30s and 40s, for a while, there was virtually no official opposition to our ministry. But as the decades rolled by, we saw more and more municipal attempts to regulate our public ministry. It's reminiscent of what had happened earlier in the 30s and 40s. Back then,
Thank you so much to Molly Fijani Harrison. What the fuck is this? Sarah, their own pretend newsroom late to the party. This is just, you know how Jehovah's Witnesses are builders. Jehovah's Witnesses are builders. And because Jehovah's people are built. So if they want to use a pretend newsroom for Robert Hendricks, then, they get their pretend newsroom. Honestly, that is a really good observation. I don't think I have seen this newsroom like before or after. So did they literally just build this just to make this self-congratulatory video? Like, is that what this setup is? Like, why couldn't they just use, I don't know, like the JW broadcasting area? Like, why did they have to build a thing? Like, just use the JW broadcasting thing, and there's a desk over there. You only have 3 people.
And Hayden Covington was the attorney who most frequently represented Jehovah's Witnesses. And he said something quite telling. I'm quoting from him. Many municipalities had enacted, I'm quoting, a weight of barnacle-like ordinances that virtually nullified the Bill of Rights and wallowed the Constitution in an undemocratic sea. Now, that's poetic language, but in plain English, what it means is Covington was saying, of what right is it that the Constitution would have a Bill of Rights if a local town council could on their own enact an ordinance that nullified that Bill of Rights? So one would think that with the victories we had in the 30s and 40s, that the issue of whether we could go door to door was resolved permanently, but that was not the key. That was not the case. As decades rolled by, we saw more and more municipalities attempting to regulate our public ministry, as if those cases in the 30s and 40s meant nothing.
In fact, the Solicitor General of Ohio,
they wanted to do this as if, those cases from 100 years ago, what, did they not mean anything? Why are you doing this? The world is pretty much the same place.
also joined in the argument before the Supreme Court. What was going on nationwide, Paul, at that time?
Well, nationwide, there were hundreds of municipalities that had ordinances similar to Stratton and were endeavoring to encumber the ministry of Jehovah's Witnesses. So we didn't face that difficulty only in the village of Stratton. For example, we faced the difficulty in Oradell, New Jersey, where not only did they require Jehovah's Witnesses prior to going from door to door to obtain a permit, but to wear that permit as a badge. In the first conference we had with the federal court judge, the judge turned to the village attorneys and said, "This sounds unconstitutional to me. You fix it or we will." But we had a much different experience when we litigated in Ohio.
Now, why was the issue so important to the village? What was the premise of this case for them?
They asserted 3 interests: privacy of the residents, prevention of fraud, and some sort of crime prevention rationale. But as the trial illuminated, there was some bias against Jehovah's Witnesses on the part of some village officials.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the history of the Supreme Court and Jehovah's Witnesses, you'll note over and over again that there were almost in every case courageous plaintiffs and witnesses. In fact, Stratton was no exception. For years in the village of Stratton, there was a problem. There was a problem preaching for Jehovah's Witnesses. In 1998, they promulgated the ordinance, passed the ordinance, and in that same year, One Jehovah's Witness
All of this
minister
just
by the name
screams Jesus. Thank you for the two buckethees. And yeah, I mean, obviously, if Jesus was here today, he would be talking to the legal department about how Jehovah does not get permits unless by getting a permit you get like an extra benefit, like tax exams, or like maybe getting some money. That, oh my God, are you for that permit? If you lose that religious permit and you lose those grants from the government, then you will want to get that permit. But if it's just permit for the sake of permits, just to make sure that the community is safe, get the hell out of here. Like that go. Jehovah doesn't want that shit.
Tuckish was stopped on her way out of the village. She had visited somebody that she knew, and she was stopped by the mayor, and he said, "We could put you in jail for this." Let's let her recount that unforgettable experience that changed her life and really set the course for the Supreme Court.
Changed her life because it validated all of the us versus them mentality that we have inculcated in her since she was a little child. Oh my God. They even set up like this drone shots and shit. How much did they invest in this stupid self-congratulatory? Like, I'm telling you, nobody jacks off like this religion. Like, oh my fucking Christ. Like, if you have not seen like a gooner, a more pro gooner religion than this religion is when it comes to self-policing, like, but on a cult level.
The stop sign, ending the evening. I was a passenger, and the sister that was driving, and then of course another one in the back seat. As we passed the Abdullah Tavern and was approaching the stop sign to exit Stratton.
Listen, Jake needs context, okay, Jake? Join from the beginning.
Is when this gentleman approached our car and was very upset with us of why we was in the town.
He came walking out screaming, like yelling or hollering at us to stop.
I, of course, had no idea at that time who he was. And as he was very upset and yelling at us, I had asked him who he was, and he told us he was the Mayor Abdullah. We explained to him why we came back, that people had asked us and welcomed us back. And he still was very distraught and upset, shaking so bad that I was afraid of what might happen with him. But he was even wanting to throw us in jail, but since we were women, he wouldn't do that.
When we left, thank goodness I wasn't driving. The other sister was.
Oh yeah, this guy who was persecuting us, he could have done something worse, but he didn't because misogyny, because gender rules. What?
And we got to the Kingdom Hall, and I think we was just relieved to be at the Kingdom Hall.
Yes, this is Stratton versus versus the Jehovah's Witnesses, because you will not force Jehovah's Witnesses to get a permit to go into the door-to-door canvassing efforts. That should not be a thing. Jehovah doesn't want that.
We went into the Kingdom Hall, and I let a brother know. He went and got a piece of paper, and I had a pen, and he had me write down everything that took place, who said what all happened. My involvement from the beginning of this case was getting prepared for the Ohio court case in St. Clairsville, Ohio in 1999. And then after that, we went for depositions in Columbus. And then both of those transcripts went to the Supreme Court. Because I spoke is why they wanted me to be used in the particular case. I feel very privileged, very precious in Jehovah's eyes to be used as a tool by him, that he's allowing me to have a part in this case that has helped not.
This is just so icky. Like, once you get out of the cult, just be like, I loved being a tool used by Jehovah. Like, I mean, come on, like that is a little bit. That's a little bit like, I know it's sad, but also it's a little bit funny, right? Like it's funny. Come on.
Ones in that area, but also around the world. We know that if individuals choose for us not to come to their homes, they can let us know that, and we would.
I clicked in it. Let me figure out how to unclick this. Oh my God, such a mistake.
That. As to the governments, if they require us to, what comes back to the things that the apostles said, that we want to obey God rather than men.
Well, 20 years later, she still has the fire.
Yes.
She's not a tool. Come on, like she's just indoctrinated like we were. I mean, I don't want to be mean to believing Jehovah's Witnesses, to these fucking assholes. Like these guys are at the top. Like, if you want to be mean to somebody, be mean to like these guys over here. These guys literally fight legal battles so a Watchtower can get away with like quasi illegal things.
Reminds me of some of the research I've done to some of these seminal cases, the Clara Schneiders, who we mentioned, Alma Lovels, Grace Marsh, Roscoe Jones, Billy Gabaitis. All of these cases seem to stand on the shoulders of strong witnesses, strong plaintiffs. How important was Tammy in this call?
Oh, she was pivotal. She helped us show the federal court judge that this was a real world problem that cried out for a constitutional solution.
And the zeal of Tammy was not an aberration. That's the rule. If you go back to Roscoe Jones, he wasn't arrested once or twice. He was arrested dozens of times. Often he'd be arrested. The mayor would tell the chief of police, put him in jail. When he got out of jail, take him outside of town and drop him off on a country road. Roscoe and Thelma would walk back into Opelika and continue preaching.
No, I mean, she's literally a tool of these old men. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's who you are as a cult member, or you are nothing but a literal tool, like to be used. Like you are an object for you. Hopefully, that an object that is useful for this cult. That's literally how you are seen. So yeah, if you meant a literal tool, yeah, that's unfortunately that's who you're supposed to be as a cult member.
Life.
Well, we're ministers
A
first,
slave, yeah.
So we make this a matter of prayer, but also we're attorneys. So we had to get our minds around the universe of First Amendment jurisprudence in order to set forth a case that the Supreme Court would accept.
And we approach this litigation not just as a mere legal battle, but as an expression of our faith, Robert. We didn't want to give God a mediocre or half-hearted gift. We wanted to do our very, very best. And actually, the individuals who prepared the pleadings, that was Don Ridley, Richard Moak, James Deffabaugh, Paul and me, before we would ever put pen to paper, every morning, we would first offer a supplication to Jehovah. Help us to do the best we can.
Interesting. James Deffabaugh, you mentioned.
Yes.
Senior paralegal to the team. He was there with you all the time, including at the Supreme Court hearing. We had the chance to catch up with him. In fact, we had an extensive interview with him remotely. And he talked about the case, and he talked about February 25th, 2002, the night before the case. How did you all feel? He describes the feeling right here.
It's almost like you feel the gravity of what can be decided on that day. And so there definitely was some nervous anticipation because we were concerned that, and we knew the risk in taking the case to the Supreme Court was, will they actually erode the protections in the 40s, or will they take it the one step further that we were asking?
Oh my God. Like, guys, why are Jehovah's Witnesses like this? Why are Jehovah's Witnesses like this? They're like, oh, it's just when we took this to court, we knew that we would either, we on one hand we could win, right? But then on the other hand, and stay here with me on this, we could lose. So, what if we lost and did not win? Because that was we know that's a possibility. What did this guy just I can't. All right. We can do it now.
Asking them to take it. There's a knot in your stomach because you have no clue how it's going to go. And you're waiting for the case to be called. And we know what's at stake because hundreds of municipalities already are trying to enforce permit laws on us and other types of laws that we know if we lose, it's just going to explode across the country. And
let's get on this one instead, which is a little bit faster because this is just taking for fucking ever. There you go. We were over here.
It was nice to see that the justices, no one interrupted through that whole first part of his
See, it's way better, huh?
presentation, and they showed great respect.
It's 11 o'clock Saturday morning in the village of Stratton. Good morning. In light of recent events, I've made a special effort to come to your door to speak to you about what the prophet Isaiah has referred to as the good news of something better. That's the good news Christ Jesus spoke about, the good news of the kingdom of God. It is a criminal act to go from door to door in the village of Stratton and deliver that message unless one has first obtained a permit from the village to do so. It is also illegal to go from door to door and hand out a leaflet that says, "Democracy is wonderful. Please vote next week."
Well, Paul, you've knocked on a lot of doors probably in your life as a Jehovah's Witness minister, but that was probably the most consequential knock you've ever had.
I would think so, Robert.
What were you thinking in opening with what some would call a Jehovah's Witness sermon?
I wanted the court to see what was being criminalized. That simple notion of a citizen going to the door with a Bible-based message of hope, peace, and comfort was a criminal act unless the individual obtained a permit. But that law also extended to political discourse. So someone who wanted to engage in anonymous political speech would likewise be committing a criminal act if they went to the door and said, "Vote for Robert Hendricks in November."
I hope they never go to the door saying that. But let me ask you this, because it really surprised me.
I hope they never say that, because then I'd get automatically not disfellowship, but kicked out of this religion. What is it? It's called when you resign from this religion. It's considered resigning from this religion if you run for office.
That immediately Chief Justice Rehnquist just pounced on you after that. It was, and then the entire time, all we're hearing is back and forth between them, between you. How do you prepare for something like that? You have a time limit. How do you prepare for that?
Well, only the opening is well rehearsed and prepared. I had notes designed to take me to different topics or subjects should they come up. But one of the best pieces of advice I received in preparing for the oral argument was from a professor at Georgetown Law School, who said to me, "Paul, the president will never invite you in the Oval Office while he's making a decision that impacts you. Congress will not invite you into their inner sanctum when they're making decisions. But the Supreme Court, the longest amount of time they spend discussing your case is when you are in front of them, and they're inviting you to be part of that process." So in my mind, it became a collaborative endeavor, a dialogue, as it were. Now, that didn't mean that some of the questions weren't combative. They were. But it's
they certainly were.
They were. But it's a communicative process. And at times, the justices spoke to each other through you.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. It's interesting that on October 15, 2001, that's when the court granted certiorari to this case.
Did they change the word dissociation too? I thought it was just changing disfellowship to removed. Actually, that's why I couldn't come up with the right word, because I'm like, oh, it's automatic dissociation, but I'm like, oh man, is it automatic removal now, or is disassociation like is that still in use? That's a really good question that I don't think we have the answers to just yet, because Jehovah's Witnesses never think of this shit. Like they never think things through.
And allowed you to argue your case before the court. This next exchange seems to crack the door open to go beyond the question that was at hand. The question that was certified was the one on political speech, anonymous political speech, which may surprise some regarding Jehovah's Witnesses. But let's listen to this first audio excerpt of the case and give a little sense of why the door might be cracked open to something bigger than just anonymous political speech.
Your Honor, we are not suggesting at all that a resident cannot post a no trespassing sign and keep all the way from their door. However, in order to get the right to go to that door, one must go to the mayor, give his name, give a brief description of the cause they want to speak about, as well as their associational affiliation. We believe that this court in McIntyre said there's an interest in having anonymous works enter the marketplace of ideas, and that unquestionably outweighs any interest in requiring disclosure as a precondition to entry.
Well, do you focus on the right of anonymity or the right of unrestricted speech as of the time you get to the door or when you go to the mayor's office? Because our most recent cases talk about going to the door. And that's where your brief focuses on it. It seems to me that what you've begun with, and it's also troubling to me, is that you have to make the disclosure to the mayor as well. So I take it those are two different parts of your case.
Correct, Justice Kennedy.
But you emphasize only the latter, really, in your briefs. Are the records that the mayor keeps, are they open to the public?
They are absolutely indeed, Your Honor. Under Ohio state law, those records are open to the public. So anyone would be able to go to look at the record, which would include the name, your message, and your associations.
You would have no objection to this statute if you didn't have to give your name?
Your Honor,
it's perfectly okay to say you can't talk to anybody without getting a permit, so long as you don't have to give your name when you get the permit.
Your Honor, we believe the name is the constitutional infirmity indeed.
That's the only problem. So if this were revised somehow so that all you had to give was a reference, maybe somebody in the community who would vouch for the integrity of these Jehovah's Witnesses, that would then be okay. Because
no, Your Honor.
The only problem is that they have to give their name. You see, I would have thought you would have objected to the necessity of going to the mayor and saying, please, Mr. Mayor, can I talk to your citizens going house to house? But that's not your problem. Their only problem is that you have to disclose your identity.
No, Your Honor. We do not believe that anyone needs to go to the government for permission to speak to their neighbor about any message. Yeah. Most importantly, a message.
That's the strongest part of your case.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, some in the audience might have missed Scalia saying that's the strongest part of your case. But clearly, Justice Scalia was opening the door here. I mean, you were talking about McIntyre versus Ohio Election Commission. That was a case on anonymous political speech. But it would confuse most people because most people know Jehovah's Witnesses have no problem giving their name. What was the issue?
That's correct, Robert. The United States Supreme Court takes cases based on questions presented. Mm-hmm. What's the legal question that is presented? The first question that was presented was the impact of the ordinance on Jehovah's Witnesses' free exercise of religion, speech, and press. But during the course,
that makes sense, right?
Makes perfect sense.
Typically, a religious organization would go and deal with the free exercise clause, not the free speech clause.
I hate how Robert Hendricks is always just like interrupting people and like asking leading questions to get the exact answer that he wants. And like he's like, no, shut the fuck up. Like I'm asking you this thing so you can tell me this thing. Like it's just so controlling and just so slimy. Robert Hendricks is one of those people that I'm sorry, but I kind of hope like he never wakes up because then his life is going to be like the worst possible version that it could be. And I don't think he deserves to wake up. You know, like he has made life like worse for so many people, like not even without being a governing body member. He has made life worse for so many people that I'm like, I hope you don't wake up. You know, like all of this, like Jehovah's Witness are victims and all that stuff. Like all that narrative, it doesn't apply to him. Just. I'm not fully righteous. All right. I would not forgive him. Like God may forgive him, but I don't have to.
Correct.
So what happened here?
Well, during the course of the briefing, it became clear that if Jehovah's Witnesses needed to obtain a permit, so too did anonymous political speakers. The First Amendment is so powerful that the court says, even though that's not your right, though that's not your interest, we'll allow you to assert it so that we can defend the First Amendment. However, there was a little bit of question about whether we should have put that in the case.
In fact, didn't you have a consultant who was a consultant for the Supreme Court? You brought them in to give you some advice, and they said, don't go with this second question. They told you to go with the free exercise, not the anonymous political speech. Yeah, am I right?
Yeah, they were stronger than that. They said, if you put this anonymous political speech as a question presented, you will convey to the court that you don't know what you're doing. Your petition will never get past the clerks, to the justices themselves. But I saw it so clearly, Robert. I prayed to Jehovah. I said, Jehovah, please, I see this so clearly.
Even as late as 2019, it is illegal to record hearings in courts in USA unless given permission. Very interesting, says Virginia McAllister Evans. Just Googled it. That is very interesting indeed. Oh, wow. If that's true, that would be very, 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 oh my God. Hypocrisy that their judicial meetings cannot be recorded. That is so true. That is so fucking true. Like, it's just, our judicial meetings will not be recorded for privacy reasons. However, let me record this thing that we're probably not supposed to record. this is very interesting. Like, so they may not have had permission, and even if they did, like it really, again, it just shows how in a cult is always rule for thee and not for me. Like, always, 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 the cult will always break every single rule that you have to follow.
I'm going to speak to the attorneys again to help me see where I'm wrong.
So that's where faith and your professionalism kind of merge. They're intersecting now. So you go with this second question. What happens when you get when you gain certiorari from the Supreme Court?
Supreme Court granted cert only on anonymous political discourse. Did not accept the question presented based upon our free exercise of religion.
And now to go back to Justice Scalia, it's likely because of Justice Scalia, right?
That's exactly the point. With Scalia's comment, we saw that the door had opened for us to discuss squarely how this ordinance impacted on our activity. And Robert, from that point on, anonymous political speech ceased to be the topic. It got really square to what are Jehovah's Witnesses doing and how does this impact on your activities? Well, with that door open, we were able to not have to tiptoe around the anonymous political speech, but get right squarely to the point of our public ministry.
Now the Buckley case does come up later, and that's the second precedent-setting case about anonymous political speech. So we'll get back to this issue of the question. But one of the primary arguments that the village cited as a reason for the ordinance was community safety. Both Justice O'Connor and Chief Justice Rehnquist seem to be sympathetic to this argument. Let's go back to James Defebaugh as he reflects on this key moment in the case, where we'll hear Justice O'Connor first, but then we'll also hear Chief Justice Rehnquist talk about how this ordinance might impact on community safety.
We kind of anticipated that Rehnquist would probably be against us, because I think what Rehnquist was saying articulated our fear of, is this how the judges will view things in a post 9/11 world?
Do you think that the practice around the country of various towns and cities is to require permits for people to go door to door in residential areas? I think I even live in a community that probably does that. The concern may stem from a concern about preventing burglaries and unfortunate incidents in the area.
Also, all of these assholes, like the justices, all of these assholes live in. I mean, some of them are dead by now, but all of these live in gated communities. All right, like they are not affected by this. They're just ruling on something that will not be affected by. They will not be affected by because Jehovah's Witnesses are not bothering them. That does not happen because they all live in gated communities.
They want to identify the people who are going door to door.
Justice O'Connor, my experience is quite to the opposite. That after the battles between Jehovah's Witnesses and municipalities in the 30s and 40s, municipalities have stopped attempting to regulate Jehovah's Witnesses by forcing them to get a permit to go from door to door. This is an experience that we're having in the past few years, that more and more municipalities are now requiring not only a permit, but as Justice Scalia touched on, fingerprinting, photographs.
There was a story in the paper just last week here about the double murder up at Dartmouth, how the kids who did it went from house to house purporting to be taking a survey, and then what they were actually doing was casing the houses for robbery. So that's certainly something that a municipality can take into consideration, isn't it?
Chief Justice Rehnquist, we think it's implausible to think that someone intent on committing a violent crime would stop at the City Hall to get a permit or in any way be deterred. And in the circumstance Your Honor posits of someone just going door to door and observing or taking notes, the ordinance in this instance doesn't prevent that. The only time the ordinance comes into play is if
but it does give a record of who it was, which would probably...
By the way, Jehovah's Witnesses, we're supposed, up to a point, up to like now, like the 2000s, we're supposed to go visit people, and then after they've interacted with them, take notes, take down the name of the person, where they lived, what they talked about, what they saw in the house or whatever, to make indoctrination easier down the line. So they're like, oh, it doesn't prevent us from taking notes or whatever, which is like the most horrible thing that we're already doing. So it doesn't prevent creeps from doing that. We've been doing it for 100 years.
Deter someone.
The question was, I guess, really when Rehnquist was going down that line of questioning with Paul, is how many sympathize with his arguments?
Talk about sympathize. Clearly, O'Connor was intrigued by the issue, because this just happened the other day. I think it was yesterday. I was listening to oral arguments again right in my ears, and as Chief Justice was talking and making these assertions regarding Dartmouth, you heard Justice O'Connor twice go, good thing you didn't hear that. So this was a post 9/11 world. Was there a fear, Philip, that perhaps the justices would be sympathetic to this argument?
Well, that was exactly the point. This was post 9/11, so there was a concern for safety and avoiding crime, fraud. The authorities made this a cornerstone of their argument, that the ordinance should have been upheld because it would be protected against crime. The fact, though, Robert, is that the ordinance did nothing to protect.
Hate to agree with JW lawyers, but that's a good point. You aren't going to stop a murderer by requiring a door-to-door permit. No, you're not. You're not. That being said, I believe that if religious organizations are doing door-to-door canvassing, they should have permits. And the people doing door-to-door canvassing, who are actively doing door-to-door canvassing, should not have any kind of like criminal record and all that stuff. And because that happens in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, I have heard stories, like just told, like testimonies that have been told to me, like not just like I've read about it, like to other people happening. No, this has happened to people that I know, that where, you know, people were forced on them while they were on the door-to-door preaching work. Like they were that's where their trauma stems from. That's where the violating happened. So those people should not be able to just legally go door to door anywhere. You know, like to just go door to door to try to recruit you into that cult. Like, just that, again, that's before even considering that this is a cult. So you probably should not give them a permit to do door to door canvassing. So yeah, this isn't gonna stop a murderer, obviously, but I don't think it's a good point, because I think it's just building a straw man. Like, this isn't about stopping murderers. This is about controlling or having just a slight layer of control over who is allowed to just systematically go door to door into the whole country, into your neighborhood. The state, I do believe the state should get involved into this kind of like door-to-door canvassing, and you should at the very least require a permit and make sure that nobody that is doing that kind of stuff has had any kind of violent or sexual criminal record. And at the moment you allow that to happen, that's the moment where you give up your right to have that permit. I do believe that, and I do think that it is a sad thing that these guys won back in 2002, and I think that's what the only reason why they haven't won this big any lately is because apostates exist nowadays. So now you have another voice other than the Jehovah's Witnesses who are sharing the actual truth, and the truth actually makes more sense than the Jehovah's Witnesses straw man.
In fact, Paul, I think your response to the Chief Justice was very powerful. Did that put the issue to rest at this point? And why do you think the issue did not resonate with the rest of the justices, as can be seen in the actual decision?
Two reasons. One, you mentioned the decision. Justice Stevens said, really, it is implausible to think someone who's going to commit a violent crime is going to be deterred by a permit ordinance. And with respect to Stratton, there was no verification mechanism to know who was obtaining the permit. I could go and say, I'm Philip Brumley, give me a permit. They would give me a permit in Mr. Brumley's name. So the ordinance did nothing really to prevent crime.
Well, we get off that issue and get back to anonymous political speech. Things seem to get interesting during the discussion of the Buckley case, which, of course, is the second precedent-setting case in anonymous political speech. That involved volunteers in Colorado doing electioneering, gathering petitions. Justice Scalia seemed to cut off this line of questioning, saying that using the case was a poor example. Let's go back to James Defebaugh. He has some reflection on how Justice Scalia interacted and what this meant for the rest of the argument.
At that point, Justice Scalia said to Paul, why don't you just tell her that it was a bad example and move on?
Because of the compelling governmental interest that's involved, Justice Ginsburg, and that's the distinction. When we have one-on-one...
That doesn't handle your example. I mean, why don't you just say it was a bad example? You shouldn't have used the example.
Is it
not worth
you
shouldn't have used the example of a petition circulator. You are concerned about people who just want to come up and say, I want to talk to you about why you should vote for Smith.
That's correct.
Is that the case?
It is indeed.
Thank you.
And so she asked no more questions after that. And the issue was dropped.
YouTube user says knocking on people's doors telling them that they are going to die unless they convert and comply should be banned on grounds of threatening behavior. That, yes. Yeah, I mean, in a sane world, this is exactly how people would see Jehovah's Witnesses. They're basically, their message of hope is you have hope of surviving Armageddon by converting into this religion. That's the message of hope. If you don't, you will die. That should be illegal. That the fact that that is legal, not only legal, but that is their right as a religious community that does not pay taxes. That just blows my mind, and that just really shows how much work we have to do to show how harmful the religion is, like how illegal it should be, how bad it should be.
She could see that we weren't trying to push the agenda that would affect the cases that she had authored, and the whole demeanor of the court seemed to change after that. I don't believe, from my memory, that Justice Rehnquist raised any more issues after that short window of questioning that he brought, and the tenor just seemed much more positive after that. And it started to feel like, okay, maybe there are a number of them that they get it, they understand what we're trying to say, and they might actually rule for us, a number of them.
So as much as there was some concern or just kind of bewilderment as to why this was your issue, Justice Scalia seemed to shut down the whole Buckley case because, of course, you use that in your pleadings. Describe what's going on here.
Well, since the court accepted the case of anonymous political discourse, we had to rely on that case law. So you mentioned McIntyre earlier. Mrs. McIntyre wanted to hand out leaflets without her name about a political message. Supreme Court said she had every right to do that. Buckley also involved, in some ways, anonymity. So we were compelled to use that. However, Justice Ginsburg authored Buckley. So she was concerned, I believe, that the decision in Stratton might in some way undermine her decision in Buckley. And what Scalia was doing was really helping us out.
Right.
I think communicating to Justice Ginsburg, Buckley's okay, and communicating to me, understand, we've taken the case in anonymous political discourse, but we know you are who you are, and we're going to allow you to speak to that.
So, I mean, even it seemed that Ginsburg was saying this doesn't work. Buckley doesn't work for you.
Right.
So, but Scalia was saying, just tell her it was a bad example. Just tell her it was a bad example. Why would you use it if it was a bad example?
Well, we had to use the cases on anonymous political discourse because that was the question that the court presented. That's what got us into the door. But Scalia effectively terminated that line of inquiry, and for Justice Ginsburg, satisfied her on Buckley.
Mm-hmm. Philip, how important is this crosstalk between the justices?
So exceedingly important, Robert. And you see at the beginning of the discussion that Rehnquist was clearly not in favor of our proposition. And we saw as the case, the oral argument unfolded, didn't appear that others were in favor either, O'Connor and Ginsburg. But precisely because of that crosstalk between each other, Paul at times almost like an observer as these justices were expressing their views, we saw that shift where first O'Connor and then Ginsburg started to favor what we were proposing and our position. And so we could see that the argument was really going in the right direction and the judges were going our way.
Well, the oral argument seemed to wrap up on a high note with the facts of the case crystallizing in the minds of the justices. In fact, they even seemed to be playful at the end, ending up on a real high note. Let's go back to James Defebaugh as he introduces this exchange between Paul and the justices.
You know, it seemed like he was in very good control to me at that point in the argument, and he had become relaxed and calm and seemed in control.
No, I'm confused here. I had thought that you object to this even if the name doesn't have to be disclosed, and even if there is not excessive discretion given with the mayor.
Exactly.
It's not your objection that you do not want to have to go to City Hall in order to ring doorbells.
Right.
Precisely, Justice Scalia.
No matter what.
Precisely.
They want you there because they know at least you'll find out which homeowners don't want people around. And you'll read what the rules are, all right? Is that good enough?
Justice Breyer, we have not contested that provision of the ordinance. Section 11607, which allows a homeowner to post a no solicitation sign and then go to the village and say, I want this group and not this group, has not been contested.
But your position is, of course, that governments always want to know what its people are thinking, but they don't have any right to find out.
Well, that's an expression of the residents' interest in who they want. It's not the government making the decision for them. Now, with respect to
I'm talking about your clients.
Your Honor, we
Take it. It's good.
Okay.
Jesus Christ. Like, how incompetent are they? How? It's just, The guy is throwing the Jehovah's Witnesses a bone. And the lawyer, it's such an idiot that he's arguing against it. And another justice has to be like, shut the fuck up. He's throwing you a bone. I honestly, the fact that they ever win anything at all, like I have never seen the Watchtower, the Jehovah's Witnesses, do a good job in court. At this point, I have not just like heard this, I have read through like thousands of pages at this point of just court documents, how they argue, what they use. It's always the same stupid strawman, and they always do a bad, stupid job. And the only way that they get away with it is because the people who are in charge don't realize how bad and like how evil the Jehovah's Witnesses really are. They're like, they're just Christians. No, we're Christians too. Like, I'm gonna cut you a break because you're Christian like me. No, it's insane to me. It is insane to me how the call that is supposed to be the truth has the worst defense, and not only how it has the worst defense consistently, but how it works sometimes. Like now, like it worked one time in 2002, and they're still talking about it. Like they made this very like high production video just to remember, just to masturbate over how good they are at the law. And even in their like self masturbation, they can't help to admit, oh no, we actually fucked up over here. The lawyer had no idea what was happening at one point. It was very funny.
I think that's an appropriate point, Chief Justice Rehnquist asked, if I may reserve the balance of my time.
When he got to a good places with the justices, don't overstay your welcome. Sit down and reserve your time in case you need it at the end.
I think that's a good time to reserve my time. I thought that was really Scalia, Justice Scalia was obviously kind of micromanaging this case all the way through from the beginning. But when you crank up the volume, and this happened to me on a different bike ride, listening to the oral arguments, you hear right at this point, you hear somebody saying, reserve time. Now, you don't remember this, but Philip, you do.
So it's not like the justices line up and ask their questions nice and neatly, one at a time. The justices were peppering Paul simultaneously with different questions, and the adrenaline was flowing. We could see those lights flashing. It said, you have 30 seconds, you have 15 seconds. Paul was still engaged. And I do remember leaning over, hey, reserve your time.
So, Paul, why now? Why at this point?
Well, I was in a zone with the courts. I didn't hear Philip, but I was paying attention to the lights. I knew my time was expiring, but I also saw the comportment of the court. They were done. And I heard what Justice Scalia said, and it seemed like a positive note. When you don't have anything else to say, shut up and sit down.
Do you think that at that point, Justice Scalia was with you?
Yes.
I mean, was that your feeling, Paul?
Is that the guy just admitted to it? They're like, yeah, no, when you don't have a good thing to say, shut up and sit down, Philip Brumley. Shut the fuck up. You were fucking it up. You just shut the fuck up. It's just they're so incompetent. They're so incompetent that even when they're bragging about how competent they are, they can't help but to show how incompetent they are. It's insane. It's crazy. They made this.
I felt that he would have been very favorable to a free speech claim going in, and I felt that he maintained that position throughout the argument.
So opposing counsel begins his argument. First of all, it's the village attorney, then the Solicitor General. And the justices seem to be ready to challenge, and challenge they did. James Deffabaugh remembers this moment well because it was a point in the case that he began to feel good.
So when the Solicitor General for Ohio got up and the justices started tearing into him pretty quickly, it became pretty apparent that more than we thought maybe were seeing things from our perspective, and that this idea of having to go to the government before you talk to your neighbors is just ludicrous to them. I will say this, I felt as much as the court went after him, the Solicitor General did a fairly decent job with what he was dealt by the court. But then when the attorney for the town got up. It just went to a whole other level of bad for the other side.
Do you know any other case of ours that has even involved an ordinance of this breadth, that involves solicitation, not asking for money, not selling goods, but even, you know, I want to talk about Jesus Christ, or I want to talk about protecting the environment? Have we had a case like that? I mean,
there is.
The mere fact that I'm unfamiliar with something like that, maybe they've become current now, but the mere fact that I don't even know of such cases over 2 centuries makes me wonder. Do you know of any?
Your Honor, there is no holding by this court that identifies this.
Never mind a holding, a case in this court involved. The breadth of this thing is novel to me.
There is no case that identifies the breadth of this case, but perhaps that might be part of the beauty in the sense that it is content neutral, and that
you think it's a beautiful idea that I have to ask the government for permission before I go down the block where I don't know all of the people. I wave to them, but I don't really know them. I say, I want to talk to you because I'm concerned about the garbage pickup, because I'm concerned about our congressman, whatever. I have to ask the government before I can do that?
So that's how the Jehovah's Witnesses won, I guess. They won because they managed to fool these idiots into believing they're strawmen, into being like, what? So are you saying that I can't go down to my neighbor's like block about talk about the garbage? The only thing this analogy shares with the Jehovah's Witnesses is just the garbage talk. Like, because Jehovah's Witnesses don't just go to their neighbors; they go systematically all across the country. It's not about going to your neighbor, about asking a thing and then needing a permit about it. The fact that this worked with the justices just shows how stupid the justice system is in the United States. Like, just shows how none of these assholes deserve to be in charge. I'm sorry. Come on. I'm sorry. Come on. I can't talk about SCOTUS without violating TOS. Exactly. Like, it's just... This shows you just how incompetent everybody is. Like, it's just... It's not just that the Jehovah's Witnesses are incompetent. It's almost like a comedy of errors, because turns out the justices are even more incompetent than the Jehovah's Witnesses. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are like, oh, you know, we do door-to-door canvassing. Oh, but so what? Are you gonna ask your neighbor for something about the garbage, and then the neighbor is gonna ask you about a permit? Like, do you need to get a permit for that? And then the justices are like, you know what? That is a really good point. That completely, like, strawman fallacy. That is a completely good point. Like, oh my god. Oh, I knew that Jake would become a member when I sided with him on the left like this. I knew that.
No, Your Honor. What we are talking about are canvassers, hawkers, and those who are going door to door for a cause.
Well, how about trick-or-treaters? Do they have to go get a permit?
Ooh, that was painful.
See. Oh, that was good. That was good. Even though we would never, you know, we think trick-or-treaters are evil, but for a completely different thing, you know. The fact that they're for trick-or-treaters, like, we can pretend to be for trick-or-treaters, and this, oh my god, everybody is just so bad on this. Like, it's just, it's insane how bad everybody is, that I'm stoned right now and a little bit tipsy, and I can still pick up on how stupid everybody else. Like, it's just, I'm an idiot. Just remember that. Like, if I, an idiot, can pick out the flaws in the logic of this, like, that means that everybody is just even worse than an idiot who's stoned.
Well, when you heard that, Philip, did that surprise you?
Speaking of which,
the justices just were so combative.
So when we went in and Paul started talking, we didn't know which way the court was going to go. But as his argument unfolded, we saw the justices were understanding what we were trying to say and were sympathetic to what we were saying. It was a completely different picture when those who were defending the ordinance stood up to argue their case. Really the derision that the court manifested towards the...
You're a Patreon already, because, oh, remember, you can join Patreon as well to support the show. You just XJW Caleb, Patreon/XJW Caleb. Patreon.com is like, I fucked up. That's why I don't have
ordinance. When the justices said, you think it's a beautiful thing, really? So it was clear that the court was
Couldn't
going
have
our
said
way.
a worse thing. That brings me, Paul, to your final rebuttal, because it seems to me that you listen now to the answer from opposing counsels, and then you get up for 4 minutes, and it seems to me your rebuttal is almost like a rationale for the case in miniature. Let's listen as we bring up on the screen as Paul rebuts the argument of the respondents.
And lastly, Your Honor, I've heard our door-to-door activity be referred to as an annoyance to be compared to obnoxious picketing at the home. I respectfully suggest that our activity indeed lies at the heart of the First Amendment.
So, final statement. Did you write that out, or was that a true rebuttal?
No, absolutely true.
And why? Why?
Absolutely true rebuttal. My training as a young prosecutor, you listen to the case and you speak to what you consider important. So I listened to what was being said. One, I found it offensive that our ministry was being spoken about in a demeaning manner. But two, I wanted to remind the court that this was core First Amendment speech that deserved its protection.
Lies at the very heart of the First Amendment. Right. When you rested with those words, of course, they had some questions. Did you see a reaction from the justices?
Yes, I saw Justice Scalia was pleased.
In fact, what did you feel like at that point? Were you relieved when you saw his reaction?
Yes, he smiled at me like I was his nephew and he was my uncle. It's very hard to explain.
So
Robert.
it was like a Sunday pasta dinner with the whole family kind of arguing, and then
we're going to have you over for pasta. We'll have you over for pasta, Robert.
Well, as you both mentioned, Jehovah's Witnesses have been very active in the Supreme Court and establishing First Amendment jurisprudence in the 30s and 40s especially. Philip, what role did some of those precedent-setting cases have on the outcome of Stratton?
Well, that laid the very foundation. When you think back to those cases in the 30s and 40s, Lovell versus Griffin, Campbell versus Connecticut, Jones versus Opelika, Murdoch versus Pennsylvania, you could go on. In each case, what was involved was a very zealous Jehovah's Witness who wanted nothing more than to just talk to others about his faith or her faith. And so the question was, are those cases still good law? They formed the foundation, and Stratton said through this beautiful decision, those are still good cases.
So one of those early cases was Jones versus Opelika. In fact, it was a very
Patreon too low on the Patreon too low on the lowest level. That there is no lowest level. All of the levels are the best level, are the highest level. Just FYI, all of the you can be at the highest level on Patreon by literally supporting at every level. That is just a feature that is just unique to my Patreon. So you are literally at the highest level at every level.
And the case involved a Jehovah's Witness minister by the name of Roscoe Jones. Roscoe Jones was a person who was arrested for being on the street preaching about the kingdom of God. It was the city of Opelika, Alabama. They had charged Jones with violating its licensing ordinance by selling books without a license. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court. And in 1942, the Supreme Court upheld the conviction. Interestingly, in the following term, after Jones 1 was decided, the court heard a re-argument in the Jones case and consolidated other cases, including a key landmark case, Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. In Jones 2, the court struck down as...
Hold on. Let's have a little Lucifer break. Hey, Lucy. Say hello to the chat. This is Lucifer. He's keeping me sane, but also he's keeping me insane because he's very smart, and he's kind of feral whenever he sees food. So I was eating pizza like just yesterday, right? And then he waited until like I opened the box of pizza, and then he just went for like the bread. And he just went like just like this for like a little bit of bread, and I had to just like take the bread out of him, like just like force the bread out of him, and he still like had like a chunk of bread. And anyway, I forgot that that did not happen. That did not actually happen. That is a fantasy that I had. That is a dream that I had. It's satire. Anyway, don't end the stream by accident. You stepped on the keyboard. No, you're gonna end the stream by accident. Don't do that. Jesus. He also gets his claws out like immediately. Anyway, that was a little Lucifer break because we needed a little bit of. I mean, Come on. What the hell are we watching?
Unconstitutional city ordinances that require Jehovah's Witnesses and other religious proselytizers to pay a license fee to practice their religion, thus reversing Jones 1. The opinion stated that the license tax restrains in advance those constitutional liberties of press and religion and inevitably tends to suppress their exercise. Well, we found a man who knew Roscoe Jones, in fact, lived with him and his wife for a time. His name is Lawrence Reed. He is a Jehovah's Witness minister. He is now 99 years old, and he says the case changed the city for good. We had a chance to get his reflections on what it was like to preach in Opelika before the Jones decision and what it was like to preach there after. Let's take a look.
Roscoe Jones came over with his wife, and they stayed with us, with me and Sister Reed. When you heard him talk, his voice had a strong voice, convincing, you know, and he was just a bold guy. The 2 weeks he stayed with us, and the time he was in Opelika, really, he was an outstanding man. He went door to door in Opelika, and he would boldly talk to, which was something unheard of. Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on a door in Opelika, you would end up in jail or beat up or cussed out or, you know. So you know the police came and arrested him.
I said, well, what's our charges? He said, oh, you're charged with blocking the sidewalks of Opelika. We have ordinance against it. I said, man can't stand on the sidewalks in Opelika? No, he can't stand on the sidewalks of Opelika. And he locked us up.
It is insane. Remember, the Jehovah's Witnesses are completely against the civil rights movement. They have literally made a video like last year or something of how you should not be for the civil rights movement, and somebody from the perspective of the civil rights movement in the UK refusing to be part of the civil rights movement because they were a Jehovah's Witness. But now, since this is freedom of speech. That oh my God, that's so important for us, guys. You don't understand. Like, we're not an activism, but oh, we care so much for human rights.
Jones was not afraid of the police. In fact, many of us wondered how he could stand, because police at that time were very mean. Police were very mean, and this frightened a lot of us. We feared that this would be the end, that the police would really crack down. When the police arrested him, instead of him stopping, he told them no. He gave them a witness, and that was a picture in the paper they took was Roscoe Jones versus the city of Opelika. He made a court case out of it. The society sent down a representative. And they said, sure, that these people can go on the street, and he ended up winning it too. They won it.
When the decision was made in our favor, it released a great multitude of Jehovah's Witnesses that had been put in prison or had been sentenced to prison for preaching the good news of the kingdom without a license. And the Supreme Court decided Jehovah's didn't need a license fee.
And when they dismissed it, it gave us a new life. It opened it up. And many of our sisters would say, man, you know, Brother Jones is going to that door, and they would follow him. They would go to the door. I remember my wife going door to door for her first time. She was saying that this was all because of Roscoe Jones, now that we could go to somebody's door and knock on the door and offer them a magazine. Roscoe Jones opened up Opelika.
Oh, we're now joined by Professor Josh McDaniel, who's the director of the Harvard School's Religious Freedom Clinic. Thank you for being with us, Professor McDaniel, and thank you for being.
Oh wow, they went as far as to interview the Harvard guy. By the way, I don't know if you guys know, but you know, like I brought the thing in, so he could be with us on the stream. Pee Wee's also over here, but she's literally every time that you see me, she is like just underneath me, just at my feet, because her bed is right here. So the whole family is here. I mean, except Brindala, but you know, the important parts of the family, I'm saying.
A part of our conversation today. You know, it's pretty extraordinary to be able to look into the past, hear the actual voice of Roscoe Jones, and talk to a witness who actually knew him.
Just FYI, he's not very convinced of being a part of the stream. Like, you know, like the more I try to like bring him in, the more he's like, you know, no, don't use me for likes. Do not use me for likes.
Tell me about Roscoe Jones.
Well, it's good to be with you today. Roscoe Jones was a heroic individual. He's been called the grandfather of the civil rights movement. And he, as a black man, would go from town to town in the South in all white areas and preach and face tremendous opposition when he did so. He was threatened, he was physically beaten, and in the Jones case itself, he was criminally charged for his preaching efforts. And as a result of his efforts in the courts to vindicate his rights, he paved the way not only for decisions like Stratton, but also for civil rights litigation itself.
People like this are amazing to me. In preparation for our program today, I read Armed with the Constitution by Merlin Newton. And this author writes about Jones. He said he won by believing in the righteousness of his cause and standing with the courage of a Daniel. And then talking about many of these Jehovah's Witnesses who stood before the court, it says, their dedication often shamed their opposition. By nonviolent means, they persuaded the Supreme Court and the nation to examine the true meaning of the First Amendment. Professor McDaniel, how important was this case to First Amendment jurisprudence and even all the way up to the Stratton decision?
Well, talk about a leading question. It's like, so let me ask you a question. Proceeds to read a thing positive about Jehovah's Witnesses, and let me tell you, proceeds to read another positive thing about Jehovah's Witnesses. So what do you think Jehovah's Witnesses are? Like, you know, if you had to say if they're positive, what do you think? Are they positive, Mr. Joshua McDaniel? Again, Jesus Christ! Like, how is Joshua McDaniel not aware that he is right now testifying for a cult, like for the stupid version of Scientology?
I'd say it's very important because it marked a very fundamental shift in the Supreme Court's approach to the First Amendment in the 1940s. You started off the decade with a decision, now infamous decision, called Go Bite Us, one of the flag salute cases, where the Supreme Court in an 8-1 decision ruled against Jehovah's Witness children. And that was followed up shortly by this decision in the case by Roscoe Jones, where the court also ruled against him. And around that time, you had several justices that were already starting to reevaluate their views and starting to question, was this the correct approach? Then you have Murdoch, and you have the rehearing of the Jones case, and ultimately the West Virginia versus Barnett case that reversed the original flag salute case. And in all of these cases, the justices are rethinking the First Amendment, and especially the exercise of religion and the free speech clauses that applies to the exercise of religion.
Fascinating. It's interesting that this was decided at the same time as Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. What's the significance of that? It was just a one-paragraph per curiam that was kind of attached to the Murdoch case. Significance?
Well, I think it's significant not only in terms of recognizing the right, which would lay the foundation for the Stratton decision that we're discussing today, but it's also, like I said, about the views of the court. The views of the court were being shaped. And as some of the justices noted, they were moving away from viewing religious activity as something akin to commercial activity and thinking of it more as core religious activity, something that should be protected, something that has a preferred place within the Bill of Rights. It
is amazing that Stratton decision, that favorable ruling, was the 50th favorable ruling for Jehovah's Witnesses. What did these victories, these 49 other ones, what effect did it have on defining and even expanding First Amendment freedoms, and what effect did it have on the Stratton case?
Well, they certainly laid the foundation for the Stratton case. They incrementally, from case to case, recognized and broadened First Amendment rights, especially when it comes to door-to-door going and speaking to your neighbors, whether it's about religion or about anything else. And like we discussed earlier, it also laid that foundation of recognizing that this type of door-to-door advocacy is also a key way of exercising religion itself. It's a historically rooted religious exercise that should receive core protection under the First Amendment.
Are you surprised that one organization could have such an impact on First Amendment jurisprudence?
Well, looking back, it really is arresting. If you look at the number of victories, these 50 cases that were brought, all the victories that they had.
Guys, the Jehovah's Witnesses are the stupid version of Scientology. The Church of Scientology is famous for, you know, the real estate transactions and all of that shit, and how they're like trillionaires or whatever. The Jehovah's Witnesses try to do the same thing. They're just too stupid to properly replicate it. So, you know, they just have some kingdom halls. So they don't even have the proper empire that Scientology has because they're too stupid to even do that. So yes, they are the stupid version of Scientology. They are.
I'm not aware of any other organization that's achieved those types of results.
Philip, why was there such a flurry of cases in the 1930s and 40s for Jehovah's Witnesses?
That's an excellent question because it refocuses the consideration to the plaintiffs. So the justices didn't just as an intellectual exercise decide to change their minds.
Wait, so is the Harvard dude just gonna like stay there? Like, like just in silence, like just being like, oh, I thought. Wait, I thought I was being.
Really organized our public ministry.
Should I just stay here?
Were quite small, 15,
What's the Harvard dude doing right now while they
congregation,
ask
our
Philip
ministry
Brumley
usually
his
don't go into
opinion?
resistance. But then pockets of resistance started to appear, and Jehovah's Witnesses started to get arrested. Now, we didn't have enough attorneys to represent all of these Jehovah's Witnesses, so a publication was produced, Order of Trial. And that was a fascinating thing because it taught each one of Jehovah's Witnesses how to defend themselves in court. So we didn't have to worry about sending a judge to the trial court. It even showed the witnesses how to file their own appeals.
You couldn't. There were hundreds of cases,
exactly
right?
right.
You went out in the ministry on a Sunday, and
Yes.
you brought your toothbrush, right?
As a matter of fact, during the 30s and the early 40s of the witnesses in the United States, 1 in 9 was arrested every year. Just for the public ministry. So when the cases went against us momentarily, it didn't stop our preaching work. And the justices saw no, Jehovah's Witnesses are going to continue doing their work no matter how often they're arrested. And going back to the flag salute issue, there was no question whether Jehovah's Witnesses were ever going to say, oh, the Supreme Court says we have to recite the flag, we might as well recite the pledge, we might as well do it. Of course not. The Supreme Court saw, regardless of what we say, witnesses are not going to be forced to say something they don't believe. As a matter of fact, Professor McDaniel.
What? The fact that they have the right to not salute the flag, which, by the way, that is a right that anybody should have. Like, anybody should have that right, right? But that fact is not like they're like, oh yeah, we're for freedoms, we're for civil rights and civil freedoms in this 2 times. When they were like, you need to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and when they were like, oh, you need to get a permit for the door-to-door permit. Oh, how dare you! You're stepping on our freedoms.
Daniels is exactly right. Others have recognized the importance of these cases. Professor McAnich, who wrote in the Cincinnati Law Review, he said this: if ever an organization had a successful day in court, it was May 3, 1943. On which the court decided 13 Jehovah's Witnesses cases. The witnesses prevailed on the merits in all of them. But then he adds this, in agreement with Professor McDaniel: Jehovah's Witnesses have had a profound impact on the evolution of constitutional law, particularly by expanding the parameters of the protection for speech and religion. They expanded the right to speak, that's going door to door, and established the right to refrain from speech. That's the flag salute issue. We won so many cases in the 1940s that the issue virtually disappeared for decades.
Well, let's get back to win number 50.
Yes.
Stratton. 20 years ago today, June the 17th, 2002, Justice John Paul Stevens, he announced.
That's a post Harvard dude, right? The Harvard dude like signed off, right? Like he's not there just being like, come on, right? He's not doing just that, right? Come on. They paused him, right? Please.
It's the decision of the court. Let's listen to that decision.
This case comes to us from the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. The petitioners are Jehovah's Witnesses who go from door to door distributing religious materials. They brought this action against the village of Stratton, Ohio, challenging the constitutionality of an ordinance that prohibits canvassers from going on private property to promote any cause without first obtaining a permit from the mayor's office. The district court upheld the ordinance and the Sixth Circuit affirmed. We granted certiorari to decide whether the ordinance violates the First Amendment. We note that the ordinance covers far more than commercial activity and the solicitation of funds. It applies to religious and political activity and would seem to extend to the spontaneous speech on a Sunday afternoon of a neighbor who decided to ring a neighbor's doorbell and ask him to vote against the mayor at the next election, or something like that. For reasons stated in an opinion filed with the clerk, we conclude that the ordinance is a species of a prior restraint that is not tailored to protecting the village residents from fraud, from invasions of their privacy, or from crime. We therefore reverse the judgment of the Court of Appeals. Justice Breyer, joined by Justices Souter and Ginsburg, has filed.
This is so stupid. This is so stupid. They're literally saying, "Oh no, like we can't have the mayor approve this because then somebody could be like, oh, I didn't get the permit to campaign against the mayor because the mayor didn't agree to it, right?" But like, that's what Jehovah's Witnesses are doing. Jehovah's Witnesses literally don't allow people to vote. They don't allow their Jehovah's Witnesses to vote. They kicked people out who vote, right? which is illegal. So they are inviting you to become part of a cult where you will not be allowed to vote, not just for this mayor, but for any mayor, for any president, for any office whatsoever. You will not be able to vote. The stupidity of the justices, the stupidity of the justice, it's the stupidity and the ignorance is just I don't know who I'm more mad at, like at the Jehovah's Witnesses or at the justices, because they're both like very stupid idiots. Like it just, oh my god, they're just so laughably like both of them, both groups are equally laughably incompetent, and it's depressing to see how when you finally get the Jehovah's Witnesses to like the highest court of office, and they can still lie their way into being like, oh yeah, no, that's right. I mean, this is just a religion. But imagine if this was against like voting for the mayor, that will be an issue. Derek is voting for everybody forever. It's just, I have no words. I have no words. Everybody is stupid. Everybody is stupid, and everybody should be replaced by new people. Like it's just nobody deserves that. Like I'm seeing a circus of clowns over here.
The concurring opinion, Justice Scalia has filed an opinion concurring in the judgment in which Justice Thomas has joined, and the Chief Justice has filed a dissenting opinion.
Well, we're joined by Keturah Dunn, who is Associate General Counsel for Jehovah's Witnesses. Welcome, Keturah. Keturah, you were a lawyer for just 18 months at the time of this hearing, and you got a chance to actually sit in the courtroom. What was it like?
It was thrilling. It really was thrilling to see it happen.
Now, just 4 months later, comes an 8-1 decision. Were you surprised?
You know, the 8-1 decision was somewhat surprising. At oral argument, there was definitely a majority that appeared to be in our favor. But given the security concerns after 9/11, we just really didn't know how it would play out. I mean, it could have been a weak decision, a simple majority, and a win is a win. But this was an 8-1 decision, which meant it was a robust endorsement of the constitutionally protected right to go from door to door. And it really sent a strong signal to state and municipal officials who may have sought to restrict door-to-door advocacy.
Professor McDaniel, 8-1 in Stratton. How important was that?
Well, I think it's tremendously important because it's showing that this is not a split decision of the Supreme Court. This is really an overwhelming decision in the claimant's favor, and it shows it's a consensus decision. But I think it's also important to note the shift from the 1940s to the 2000s, where you go from not only having 8-1 decisions against the Jehovah's Witnesses in the Gabaitis case, and then you're barely eking out a win in the later decisions in the 1940s, but now here we are in the 2000s, and you have an 8-1 victory for the Jehovah's Witnesses on this core issue.
Mm-hmm. Gabaitis or Murdoch 5-4, Philip, Jones versus Opelika 5-4, Martin versus Struthers 5-4, West.
Wait, so he has been like just there smiling on this background until this moment? Oh my god, dude, you're not even a Jehovah's Witness. Why is this religion whipping you like this? You went to Harvard, man. Like, what are you doing? This has to be like the worst part of your career, right? Like, come on, like how come a guy from Harvard end up falling that low? That is just oh man, that like ends up falling that low that a fucking like stupid stoner from Mexico like it's just making fun of you right now and still like having the lead on you. Like, you went to Harvard, man. Like, come on, like, get the fuck out of here.
Virginia Barnett 6-3. It could have gone differently with Stratton, but instead it seemed to have ensconced those rulings rather than vacate them.
Yeah, and as the Supreme Court handed down more and more rulings, more and more those rulings were not 5-4 decisions. There were 7-2 and 8-1 decisions in our favor. And so it was with the Barnett decision, 7-2. So clearly the Supreme Court was going our way, recognizing our rights.
Professor McDaniel, what was the basis of the Stratton decision then?
So the Supreme Court moved beyond the free exercise clause and focused on the free speech clause. And the court held that fundamentally, you have a right to cross the street and go talk to your neighbors without getting permission from the government. And the ordinance here was invalid in so many of its applications that the court struck down the ordinance in its entirety.
Keturah, the basis of that decision?
Well, the Stratton decision also relied on Schneider, which was our first case involving the door-to-door.
Was she not allowed to sit down at the desk with the men until halfway through these discussions as current counsel Lucifer? Yeah, well, if this was like indoctrination material, she wouldn't even be allowed to sit at the table. She'd have to be interviewed in a different area and whatever. She would not be able to sit at the table with men, like as if she's their equal. Again, this is just another proof of rules for thee but not for me in the cult. Like, you cannot be a woman and be in equal footing with men unless we want to do propaganda to like self-congratulate, and whenever Stephen Lett needs to rub one out,
Ministry of Jehovah's Witness, and another 8-1 decision. And just to underscore the relevance of Schneider to the Stratton case, our merits brief compared the two ordinances. And this side-by-side comparison revealed that many of the provisions of the ordinance...
I don't think anybody here, any attorney here, has done their due diligence, getting to know who the Jehovah's Witnesses are, like whatsoever. Like I don't understand how they get experts on these topics that are very clearly experts and have done their research on like so many things, except on this cult. Because how can you defend a cult like this? I don't know. Like, is it just like people who are just like they will argue for whoever gives them money? Like, I don't know. It's maybe I just have like a very idyllic way of how you do your career once you study this stuff and once you study the law. Maybe my view is like too idyllic and too utopian, but I don't know. Like, I don't feel like this. Like, is this why you got into law, to defend this obscure cult, so they don't have to get a fucking permit? So in their door-to-door canvassing work, like this is why you became a lawyer? Like, really? Like, I feel like everybody here should just be ashamed of themselves. Like, everybody here besides you are in a cult and they're indoctrinated. What is your excuse? You are not a cult member. Why are you here? Why are you supporting this cult? I honestly do not understand it.
Ordinance in the village of Stratton were virtually identical to those that had been enacted 60 years earlier by the town of Irvington, New Jersey. So this really underscored and emphasized the ongoing relevance of the older cases from the 30s and the 40s to Stratton.
Paul, it seemed that the court kind of sniffed that out too. I mean, in the back and forth between the court.
They're not just using worldly people. They're using worldly people to do this little internal like self-propaganda. And they're just like, hey, so you're gonna be over there, and then you're gonna freeze, and then we're just gonna have you in the background. And the guy's like, I went to Harvard,
In the Solicitor General, they said, what was this modeled after? And he said, oh, I don't know. But they saw the two side by side, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. As Keturah says in our briefing, we put the two ordinances side by side on the same page. So the court could see the village of Stratton's, the court could see New Jersey's, and they were virtually identical.
Lawyers follow the money. Lawyers are basically mercenaries without guns, says John Soto. Listen, if you're following the money, like, why are you supporting this cult? This cult isn't even that rich. Like, if you're trying to grab the bag, you go for this cult. This is how you grab the bag. Like, not just going to like Scientology or like one of the biggest, like the Mormons, like who also like have like trillions in real. And then you go for the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, again, if you're trying to grab the bag, that just shows you're stupid in like a different level.
So in essence, what the court said is, we struck
like by
down
supporting this cult. I mean,
that doesn't go into the dustbin of history. It controls what we do today.
Interesting. When you talk to somebody about this decision, Professor McDaniel, typically they would say, well, you must have won on the free exercise clause of the First Amendment. You talked about that. No, it was the free speech clause. And in fact, in Justice Scalia's concurrence, he says just that. Let's take a listen. Actually, let's bring it up on the screen. This is what he actually said. Whereas the free exercise claim, if acknowledged, would merely exempt Jehovah's Witnesses from the licensing requirement, the free speech claim exempts everybody thanks to Jehovah's Witnesses. Professor McDaniel, the significance of that statement.
Well, keep in mind that around this time,
again, fucking, oh my God, fucking asshole. Like, he just reads this thing and he's like, let me read this, like, glazing statement towards our religion. This statement that is just like, oh my God, Jehovah's Witnesses, let me, if they have a figurative penis, it would be inside of my mouth all of the time. And then they go back to the Harvard dude and they're like, okay, so your opinions on that glazation. What do you think about it?
About a decade earlier, the Supreme Court had limited the scope of the free exercise clause, and so that might have been part of the background thinking of Justice Scalia there. But he's pointing out an important benefit of ruling on the free speech clause, which you also see in a number of these other cases that were brought by Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's that if the court had ruled under the free exercise clause, its ruling would naturally be limited to the religious claimants that were in front of it. So Jehovah's Witnesses in this case would have benefited, but no one else would have. But now by ruling under the free speech clause, it's basically covering anyone who wants to go to a neighbor's house and speak for any reason, for any cause. And so based on that rationale, the court's holding now benefits everyone.
Very powerful statement. And you saw Justice Scalia, Paul, and Philip, you saw him going that way the whole time, pushing it to free speech and away from free exercise. Why, Paul?
There was a little measure of controversy over the protection the Supreme Court accorded free.
Just the fucking stupid questions of this asshole. It's like, oh, so you see this and this and this, right? Anyway, Paul, continue on that train of thought that I started. Continue saying what I said.
Says religion based on a decision that Justice Scalia authored, Employment Division versus Smith.
In fact, he mentions that in his concurrence.
Correct. And so he was making it clear, we're not going to revisit what we've decided in Smith, but we are going to establish protections under the free speech clause.
Which broadened its effect on everyone, right? Mm-hmm. But let's focus in for a moment, Philip, on its effect on Jehovah's Witnesses. Looking back 2 decades since Stratton, what has been the impact on Jehovah's Witnesses?
So significant. The doors are open. The court has said categorically we have the right to engage in our public ministry, and the government should not try to interpose itself. And as a result of the decision, the resistance, spotty as it used to be, has virtually disappeared.
Keturah, what has been the effect on Jehovah's Witnesses?
I totally agree with what Philip said. It really has helped to resolve any municipal attempts to restrict our work, and most importantly, to resolve them in a neighborly way without the need for litigation.
Now, you have been involved in cases since then, at least one significant case in Puerto Rico that used Stratton as a basis for the decision. That was in 2004. In Puerto Rico, if anybody's been to Puerto Rico, they know that many of the communities are gated or really actually walled. What do they call them? They call them controlled access laws there. How was that affecting Jehovah's Witnesses?
So just by way of background, Puerto Rico had passed this law which allowed neighborhoods to go to the government and seek a permit to wall off and gate their community. But these were public streets and public sidewalks. And the effect of that was that it began to hinder the work of Jehovah's Witnesses to engage in their door-to-door ministry because they were denied access. So Stratton was really key to bringing that case.
Why? Why was Stratton so important to the outcome of that case? Of course, you won, but why was it so important?
Well, just 2 years earlier, the Supreme Court had reaffirmed that Jehovah's Witnesses, like other speakers, had the right to engage in door-to-door advocacy on public streets and sidewalks. And again, all these communities contain public streets and sidewalks.
So that's how it affected Puerto Rico and that controlled access law. But Josh, or Professor McDaniel, excuse me, how did it affect others? How did it affect free speech in general? How did it affect your average citizen, the Stratton case and its decision 8-1 by the Supreme Court?
Well, if you look, first of all, at how it has played out in the lower courts since the Stratton decision in these intervening 20 years, it's been applied in all types of situations, anything from signage to outdoor speech to handing out pamphlets and leaflets to even street performers. But I think also zooming out, I think one way to look at it is none of us really thinks we want to cross the street and go talk with some of our neighbors about some issue at a local school or about the garbage collector or anything like that. Really, we don't even think twice when we do that maybe I have to go to run to the city hall before I can do that and get a certificate, get approval. That's something that just doesn't even cross our mind, let alone crossing our mind that could be a criminal violation to do that without the government's permission. So I think really fundamentally, this goes to our attitudes about what we can do, what we have the freedom and the right to do as citizens in our everyday conduct.
Philip, the broader effect.
So the two points, Robert. The first point is that Jehovah's Witnesses don't change. Mm-hmm. The bottom line is that we're going to engage in our door-to-door ministry. But the broader effect, as you said, Robert, Charles Haynes of the First Amendment Center wrote this.
Jehovah's Witnesses don't change. Jehovah's Witnesses will keep in the door-to-door ministry. They will keep doing it. It's just we may get rid of any and all hourly requirements for doing it, which will inevitably lead to like the death of the door-to-door ministry, especially as we know it. We will not do it, but that would be because we decided that Jehovah wanted that. That will not be because we did not get some permit because we are hiring, not hiring, but we have like volunteers who are guilty of CSA in this religion. Get the hell out of here.
Just after the decision of Stratton, we all the Jehovah's Witnesses a debt of gratitude, no matter how many times they're insulted, run out of town, or
imagine a community getting together to build a wall to keep Jehovah's Witnesses out. I mean, they're literally saying that in Puerto Rico that does not work because Jehovah's Witnesses have the right to get in. So if you do that, that does not work.
Or even physically attacked, they keep fighting for their and thus our freedom of religion. And when they win, we all win. That's the point. As Jehovah's Witnesses protect civil liberties, such as freedom of speech, we're not the only beneficiaries. Every single person in this country benefits.
Now, Professor McDaniel, if I'm a government official, what should I take note of regarding Stratton?
Well, Stratton was a resounding decision. It was an 8-1 decision. I think it's clear that the court jealously guards this right, recognizing that it's not only a right that protects Jehovah's Witnesses, it's a right that protects everyone in all types of speech. And so I would think twice before passing an ordinance along those lines, for sure.
Paul, the significance of, at this point, a municipality just passing that ordinance and ignoring this decision, what could happen?
Well, it's clear now after Stratton that the right of Jehovah's Witnesses to go from door to door is firmly established federal law. And as such, a municipal official who violates that could lose his governmental immunity. So that means that that official could be personally liable for such a violation of the Constitution.
Now, Professor McDaniel, let's get a little broader. 20 years to the day since Stratton was decided, what are the potential threats to religious freedoms on the horizon?
Well, something that I see in my clinic a lot is that there's the perception by some that religious freedom in a modern society is of diminished value. It's not as important, or perhaps it's something that should only be protected for one individual's faith, but not for other faiths. And I think what Stratton underscores, and what all these Jehovah's Witness cases underscore, is that what protects a Jehovah's Witness also protects and benefits all of us.
It's interesting that Justice Scalia was very strong on this case. In fact, as he listened to the argument of the village, he had a very powerful statement, just kind of off the cuff, regarding the difference between this country and its constitution and totalitarian governments. Let's take a listen.
The question is how much, how necessary is it? We can all stipulate that the safest societies in the world are totalitarian dictatorships. There's very little crime. It's a common phenomenon. And one of the costs of liberty is to some extent a higher risk of unlawful activity. And the question is whether what this is directed out stops enough unlawful activity to be worth the cost of requiring the privilege of ringing somebody's doorbell.
Professor McDaniel, that speaks to your thought.
What? Everybody's saying the same thing. What did he say? What the? Okay, let's listen to that again, because I feel like what is fucking fucking Scalia saying over here?
And its constitution and totalitarian governments. Let's take a listen.
The question is how much, how necessary is it? We can all stipulate that the safest societies in the world are totalitarian dictatorships. There's very little crime. It's a common phenomenon. And one of the costs of liberty is to some extent a higher risk of unlawful activity. And the question is whether what this is directed out stops enough unlawful activity to be worth the cost of requiring the privilege of ringing somebody's doorbell.
The fuck did you say? What? First of all, he's like, yeah, I mean, obviously, the quickest and easiest way to get rid of crime is to become a totalitarian dictatorship. That's proven already. So if we're already gonna have crime because we're not a totalitarian dictatorship, then shouldn't the Jehovah's Witnesses be allowed to just, canvass door to door? Because, I mean, we're already kind of allowing crime anyway. What the fuck is that? What is that? What the fuck is that shit? This is Jehovah's Witness level of reasoning. Like, what? I'm telling you, just everybody here is stupid. Just everybody here is like stupid and stupidly bad at their jobs. The Jehovah's Witnesses are bad at defending themselves, and they only win because the justices are bad at doing their jobs. It's infuriating. It's infuriating. Like it is so fucking close.
Professor McDaniel, that speaks to your thought, right? What was he saying?
Well, the government, of course, has a proper role to.
Yes, Mr. Harvard. What was he saying? What was he saying, Harvard?
It has a lot of important interests. Stopping crime, for example, is a very important interest that the government has, but so too is protecting speech, free speech, our ability to practice our faith. And so the government needs to find a way to achieve its interests in a way that, to the least extent possible, restricts the rights of its citizens. And so that's what he's saying, is that we don't live in a totalitarian dictatorship. We live in a free society. And so if we're going to live in a free society, the government just can't blanket require everybody before they go and talk to a neighbor to go and run to City Hall and get permission before they do so. That's just blatantly.
If we live in a free society, you know, we're gonna have a little bit of crime, so you can't require a permit to go canvassing to go because what if that means you can't go to your neighbors? You know, what if that permit that you need as a religion to canvass door to door keeps you from going to your neighbor to ask for a cup of coffee? Bitch, who's writing the law? Like, isn't the justices like writing the law? Like, just write that in then. Just, oh my fucking Christ. Oh my God. Oh my God. I am genuinely triggered. Like, Jesus Christ.
Unconstitutional to do that.
Interestingly, though, Philip.
Although, by the way, that is not how laws work. Okay, the laws don't work like, oh, it's just this law may be misapplied in this way. You just legislate against that shit, right? Like you legislate not against how hard is it going to be, like to do it. You make it easy. You legislate for the good of the people. Like that's the point of laws. Like it's not like, oh, it's just what if this keeps neighbors from them? Well, then writing writing over there that any neighbor can just go to their neighbors as long as, you know, like they're registered to live over there, or they can prove that they live over there. They can go to their neighbors like in like a few blocks, like a couple of blocks away without a permit, and then bingo bango, that's it. You fixed it. You fixed it. But the justices are like, oh no, it's just, you know, like if we ask for a permit for religions, look, for organizations to go door to door canvassing, then neighbors may need permits, and we can't legislate. Like, we cannot think of anything to solve that. Like, that's just going to happen because it's not like we're writing the law and can prevent that shit like very easily. Oh my God! See, Lucifer is leaving because I'm screaming too much.
Witnesses preach in some way under even totalitarian governments. What are the threats in across the world?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Robert. There are 8.5 million Jehovah's Witnesses.
I love that. Jehovah's Witnesses, even in some ways, violate the law in totalitarian governments. I just that casual, like, you know, that casual weird flex, bro. But okay.
This is worldwide. 400,000 became such just in the last 2 years during the pandemic, as a matter of fact. And because we witness worldwide under totalitarian governments, or even governments that might characterize themselves as being democratic, we face opposition and the historic battle. I'm reminded of the first case, the European Court of Human Rights. It involved Minos Kokkinakis. He was first arrested in Greece in 1938, and over the next 48 years was arrested over 60 times and spent 6 years in jail for no other reason except for the fact that he tenaciously, repeatedly spoke with his neighbors about his faith. 1993, the European Court of Human Rights handed down a decision in favor of Jehovah's Witnesses and Minos Kokkinakis. Now, Robert, that was the first of 140 victories that Jehovah's Witnesses have obtained before the European Court of Human Rights.
In fact, you just had a resounding victory just 2 weeks ago, right?
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because
this bitch just interrupting everybody. Like, I know I'm interrupting everybody with my commentary here. Like I'm just pausing them. Like, they will get to finish their thought, right? But just Robert Hendricks, he's just so smarmy. Like, he has to take ownership over everything. Like, he's just like the smallest dick energy like I've ever seen, you know? Like, And again, it's not body shaming. I feel small dick energy is completely independent of your biology. Some women have small dick energy, you know? The Karens have very small dick energy. Like that's how that works. I'm not saying they have a dick, right? Like it's small dick energy is energy, okay? Like look at me. Some may think that I have a big dick energy. And in reality, you know.
Just June 7th, 2 weeks ago, the European Court of Human Rights handed down a decision in our favor regarding 20 applications, and they consolidated that into one decision. The case is entitled Taganrog, Religious Organization and Others versus Russia. Now, in its lengthy decision, the European Court went point by point through the different arguments raised against us by the Russian authorities and dismantled all of those arguments. And regarding the concept of preaching to others,
Please address this real quick. Caleb is advocating for laws that do both things. Law to limit the organized movement and laws to make it illegal to talk to your own neighbors. There's a risk of over legislation there. No, I'm literally advocating for less legislation. Individuals should be able to speak to their own neighbors without a permit, right? They should be able to do that. However, organizations should not be able to organize door-to-door canvassing campaigns all across the country without a permit. There is a difference over there. You should only legislate it when organizations are doing it, when they're doing organizationally. If you are a guy and can prove that you're a neighbor and that you're just talking to your neighbors about whatever, that is a very different thing. That if you are a neighbor, a pretend to be neighbor, trying to indoctrinate somebody into a religious cult. They're fundamentally different things. I'm literally advocating for less legislation. You should only legislate it against corporations and organizations and not against individuals. That's it. That is the only, like, it would be a very simple solution. It is less legislation. It's just enough legislation to make sure that organizations cannot do what Jehovah's Witnesses are doing this and abuse the concept of neighbors talking to their neighbors to be like, oh, that's why we have to do door-to-door campaigns to try to convert people all around the world, because neighbors should be able to speak to their own neighbors. It is a fallacy. It is not. That's not how things work. Jehovah's Witnesses are not your neighbors. They are a cult, a religious cult, and they're not going to your door because they are neighbors. They were going to your door, especially at this time, because they had an hourly quota to the cult and they had to fulfill that. That is called an organizational effort. That is not an individual effort. All right. So this loss is a huge loss for everybody, because again, like, everybody should have a permit. Like, if you're doing organizationally, everybody should need a permit to make sure that nobody with a criminal record, nobody guilty of CSA, nobody guilty of violating human rights the way that Jehovah's Witnesses do, go to people's doors and still, have the freedom to do that the way that Jehovah's Witnesses do it. See, it's literally I don't understand, like, this slippery slope kind of fallacy where if we start restricting religious organizations, if we start restricting organizations in general, then we will restrict individuals. No, you can do two different things.
Court said this.
On. I advocate for the same rights to be granted for a formal ex-JW movement that protects our own neighbors against JW teaches as an organized JW movement that does something different. That's the thing. I don't care. Like, if this impacted ex-Jehovah's Witnesses trying to go door to door to tell their neighbors about Jehovah's Witnesses, that's fine. Ex-Jehovah's Witnesses should do it. Like, you're literally hyper individualizing this law and being like, what if it affects my group? Let it affect your group. There's people in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community that are apologists for, like, the worst kind of things. Like, there's people and not everybody in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community deserves to have the right to just go to anybody's neighborhood and just to disrupt it and talk about their views. That's not how things work. That's not, you shouldn't be able to push your views like that. Like, not your views, just your organizational views. You should not be allowed to do that shit. Like, and again, I feel like part of waking up as in being a Jehovah's Witness, you realize that going door to door doesn't actually do anything. So if I don't really see an ex-Jehovah's Witness community getting together to go preach door to door when they know firsthand how ineffective that is.
The court reiterates that the right.
So yeah, it doesn't matter if they wanted to do that and they needed a permit to do that. Why would anybody have an issue with that?
I'm quoting, to try to convince one's neighbor is an essential element of religious freedom. Citing.
This is a good thing, and just to end this thought, because I don't want to talk about this forever. Maureen Taylor says a registered offender must notify his neighbors according to Megan's law, but when that same offender goes out in service, no one is notified if there is a registered offender in group going door to door. That is thank you. That is exactly what we're doing. Megan's law literally says that neighbors cannot go to their neighbors. And just hide the fact that they're abusers if they're registered. Like, it literally says that we're already restricting neighbors at that point, right? But that same abuser can just go into door-to-door ministry and not tell their like that is a hole in the law that should be patched. It's not a slippery slope fallacy. Like, it's just the law has already not gone far enough. I feel like it's already completely like under legislated. If we're gonna have laws, if we're gonna have a government, why shouldn't they legislate over this stuff? They already proved that they need to legislate it with Megan's law, but there's this huge hole. Like, if you're a registered offender, you have to let your neighbors know, but you don't have to do it if you're door-to-door canvassing for the Jehovah's Witnesses. Then nobody has to know. Why is that fair? How is that fair? How is that not a blatant, just like misapplication of the law? It's stupid. It's stupid.
Kokkinakis. As a matter of fact, Kokkinakis is one of the most cited cases by the European Court of Human Rights. And just to add the final chapter to this, when Russia banned the worship of Jehovah's Witnesses, there were over 175,000 congregants, Jehovah's Witnesses, in that country. So even today, if one of Jehovah's Witnesses speaks to someone about his faith, he can go to jail for doing so. But that has not stopped us from doing so, even though, as we speak, 88 Jehovah's Witnesses are in prison right now, not for anything wrong that they've done, but because they merely wanted to share their faith with others. And so, teach this lesson: civil liberties.
So Megan's law more restrictive rather than suppress free speech. I mean, I don't care how we get there. Like, at the end of the day, you're arguing, okay, so legislate with Megan's law instead of legislating, like add that extra paragraph for Megan's law where they have to register if they're going door to door canvassing, instead of adding it to like a different part of the law. I mean, sure, you can argue that it should be part of Megan's law. Like, yeah, maybe. But you can also argue that, if you're gonna make it a part of Megan's law, why not just make it into its own law, and just make sure that you can't do that as an organization. You can't just hire abusers to go door to door without telling anybody that what they've done. Like, if you want to use it with Megan's law, if you want to use it with a different law, I'm all for it. It's just, I believe in suppressing free speech when that free speech means that abusers can just come knock to my door, especially if I had children, right? And the fact that we already had Megan's law shows that this is a positive thing. Like, this is a negative thing into our society. This hasn't suppressed free speech into any kind of sort of way. So we should just make sure that principle, if you allow me to use a Jehovah's Witness word, that principle is reflected and that there are no holes in that law. Like, I'm not saying restrict free speech. I'm just saying make sure that this principle that we already know that is important with Megan's law is just applied all throughout the law. And make sure that there are no holes over here.
Human rights are not stagnant. They can be won and they can be lost. They can be strengthened or they can be weakened. The fact remains, Jehovah's Witnesses are going to continue obeying God as ruler rather than men.
Professor McDaniel, think about the impact of the totality of the cases of Jehovah's Witnesses have fought and won in the Supreme Court. What has been the overall effect, the collective effect of them?
Well, for many decades now, Jehovah's Witnesses have been on the forefront of protecting and securing rights that all of us today cherish, and also helping to develop a broader and more inclusive view of the First Amendment itself. Going back to those early cases in the 1940s that we saw, that shift in the Supreme Court's view of how it treats the First Amendment, how it looks at the First Amendment. We have the court going from such a restrictive view to really some eloquent language that Justice Jackson mentioned in his Barnett decision. And if I could read it here, it says, if there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in matters of politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by word their faith therein. Now that's beautiful language, and it's language that, as a practitioner in the law, that I see time and time again in briefs and in court opinions. It's language that still embodies how we view the First Amendment today. And I think that's just another illustration, along with the decision of Stratton, that without the contributions of Jehovah's Witnesses, the First Amendment might look a lot different today.
Professor Josh McDaniel, director of the Harvard Law School's Religious Freedom Clinic, we want to especially thank you for your collaboration on this program and the collaboration of the Harvard Religious Freedom Clinic. We do appreciate it. And Philip Brumley, Paul Polidoro, Keturah Dunn, we do appreciate all the work that you do in participating in this program as well. We'd like to also thank all of you in the bar associations, court systems that work with us to accredit this program in 11 jurisdictions for continuing legal education. We had 3,750 with us for our program today, 563 joining us through 10 simultaneous CLE webinars, and 2,650 on our YouTube live stream. For those who joined us via YouTube, a legal summary,
which is where we got it from. Just remember, like this is how it got leaked.
The Stratton case is available for download on your YouTube page by clicking description right below your video feed. For those who will be staying with us in their respective state Zoom live streams, we'll have a 5-minute break, and after which we'll close and then continue a brief question and answer session to satisfy your state requirements for CLE accreditation. And for everyone else, thank you for being with us. I'm Robert Hendricks, and this has been a special live stream presentation, The Constitutionally Protected Right to Go Door to Door, How Watchtower v. Stratton Protects Free Speech for All.
And there you go. That is the whole thing, Watchtower v. Stratton. That it's not going to load. It's not going to load anymore. That was leaked 2 years ago. I wanted to get around to okay, let's remove that shit. I wanted to get around to reacting to this because this is a huge L for the government. I do believe that the government should ask organized efforts for a permit. I don't think that infringes into your freedom of speech. But let me tell you, for instance, I am for the legalization of cannabis. I have attended events where we smoke outside on the street because even though it's not legal, because we are protesting for that, right? And all of those events, we have had permissions to do that from the government, right? The government pretty much gave us permission to do something that is usually not legal, because it was a way to express our freedom of speech. As Maureen Taylor correctly pointed out, your freedom of speech is not hindered just because you need a permit. That just creates a record, right? And that just makes everybody make sure that people who are going door to door canvassing, due to an organized effort, not your neighbors, but organized efforts to door canvassing, are registered with the law, and therefore you make sure that nobody is endangered, because you're not going to have anybody who is a violent or a violent criminal doing that kind of stuff, because then you're not going to give them the permit, right? This would have been a huge L. It would have been very easy to win, and it only failed apparently because the justices are just as much of idiots as Jehovah's Witnesses, if not more. It's just exactly what Maureen Taylor is saying. Let's not forget we're talking about violence against children. This is exactly what's happening, and I know that people are going to be like, "Oh, that's just that doesn't always happen." The fact that can happen one time, that someone who is violent against children has the right to just one time go door to door in canvassing from this religion. That is, I don't think that should be legal, and I don't think that making that illegal would hinder freedom of speech. That I don't think that people should have the freedom of speech to just come at my door to tell me whatever they want to tell me when they're violent against children. I think that violates my rights as well. Like, that's not for my benefit. For whose benefit is that? For a cult who's going to be against allowing you to vote anyway? Because remember, that was the argument that they used. They used the argument of, oh, it's just the mayor may not want to approve a campaign that is against, like, not voting for him and voting for the other guy. The Jehovah's Witnesses already do that. The Jehovah's Witnesses already do that with every voting effort all of the time. Exactly. It's protecting children versus their free speech. I don't think that free speech is restricted when you require a permit to make sure that people who do not care about protecting children and, in fact, exert violence against children cannot go to your door. I don't think that is a big harm of free speech, right? To make sure that they need a permit, so those people cannot go to your door to tell you to join their cult. But again, like, it's just that's just why I consider it to be an L. Let's just remove this because Lucifer left already. Let's just close this with what I saw a lot of people saying. Why do they do this? Why did they do this? What did they get out of this? This isn't even for the rank and file. This isn't in JW Broadcasting. This isn't in JW.org. They built a whole set. They brought Harvard guy. They brought this lady in the middle. They made all of these interviews. They dramatized all of this potentially illegal recordings that they had. What for? If this is not for converting people, what does this cult get out of this? And I think it's like, have you ever worked in a startup or like that kind of vibe, like that kind of like small business where they are just really into like gaining awards, and then you go into the award and then you realize that it's just a whole bunch of like small businesses that got conned into paying to be like to submit themselves into like this award competition. And they all pay it. They're just receiving like this pretend award, and so they can be like, "Oh, we're the winners of this award." Like, it's just like, you know, they're just masturbating each other. Like, it's a circle jerk, right? It's all that it is. That is what this is. The Jehovah's Witnesses are a corporation, and they need a little bit of a circle jerk sometimes. That's what corporations need. They crave for validation. So by doing this, by having like all of these people that went to Harvard, and like this woman who's smart, and like this justice cracking jokes with Jehovah's Witnesses, they get validation. And even though this is only for internal Jehovah's Witnesses, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the Jehovah's Witnesses who crave validation, they're not the rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses. They're the people at the top, including the governing body. And everybody at the top, including the governing body, would have watched this video. So I feel like, you know, you always climb up into like access of information when you get into the cult, right? Like the more you get into the cult, the more information about this cult you will have access to. And this is like a level of access that you need to have if you're like pretty much at the top, like close to the top, like just the I guess you consider like close to the top. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is, this organization craves validation, validation from anybody. So that's why they made this, because this validates their beliefs. They have this Harvard guy saying that, you know, they are very big for human rights and they're amazing and all of that stuff. They have this justice idiots just being complete buffoons about their understanding on how Jehovah's Witnesses work, and you know, being like, oh yeah, they are like neighbors. They're like neighbors, and they're not doing organizational like door-to-door canvassing. So they did this just for validation, because at the end of the day, this cult knows that it is itself a cult. So any source of validation that they can kind of prove that they're not, then like it's awesome. At the end of the day, like sure, the rank and file is not going to watch this, but the rank and file is not as insecure about their beliefs as people at the top are. Like I think that's what this shows. The more you are at the top, the more validation you'll crave from people, and that's why you'll need this kind of information, because you'll need more validation than the people who are at the bottom, because you know the true nature of this religion. So it's insane that usually, like when you progress into a cult, the kind of information is just kind of secrets about this cult, and it's insane that as you progress in this cult, one of the part of the kind of information that you get is just validation. It's in the form of validation. Like they've made propaganda for themselves, for their own consumption. So anyway, this is just a huge circle jerk, and I just really enjoyed going through all of this like leaked video for you. I wanted to like put it out there in some way, but obviously like this is kind of long, and I didn't just want to like do a video about it, because I it's kind of like already like a little bit old, and the religion has already changed, even though they're like, oh, we will never change. I will bet you that they are preaching now. Jesus Christ, man. They are preaching now door to door. They're doing less door-to-door preaching right now, because they decided that they need an hour requirement. Then they would have made, if they had kept the hourly requirement, but they would have needed to get a permit to keep doing it. They're doing less preaching work right now. So it's insane. They are wankers. They should not get your taxes just given to me on Patreon.